This episode is sponsored by Factor. Eating better every day has never been easier thanks to Factor's ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. No prep, no mess, just restaurant-quality food in only 2 minutes. Go to factormeals.com/command50 and use code command50 to get 50% off.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks, and we have a very special guest joining us today. It's science educator and magic player. You know him, you love him. It's Kyle Hill.
Woo! What up, interwebs? Hey, Rach. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
We're so excited to have you.
It has been, many years. I think I was on to talk about CEDH the last time, and that was many years ago.
And now we're talking about precons. How the mighty have fallen.
I have come full spectrum. The visible light spectrum, that is. It's science deck time.
Today, of course, we are upgrading the science and the Mutant Menace Fallout Universes Beyond decks. We're going to do our usual upgrade. We're going to add 10 cards. We're going to take 10 cards out, but we're going to do 2 precon upgrades in one episode. Super episode.
Double stuffed.
And then at the end of the episode, we're going to compare the 2 and tell you which one we like better.
I definitely have a favorite.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. But before we get to that, you can support the show and you can pick up some sweet magic cards like these over at cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of magic products, both singles and sealed product. If you want to buy these decks whole, you can get them there. If you want to buy bits and pieces of them, you can get them there too. We're Commander players. I know you're picky about what version of cards that you get. I know I am. I'm very picky about my basics. I'm very picky about certain printings, and as they make more borders and more foils, I have a very specific taste.
Me too.
Luckily, Card Kingdom has a huge selection of cards, so you can always get the card that you're looking for, and you can order a whole bunch of those cards all in one place, get them on your doorstep in one safe package. Plus, you can do so while you're supporting the show without spending any extra money over at cardkingdom.com/command.
It's a win-win that will help you win more.
Yeah, it's value.
And if you don't have full art basic lands, what are you doing?
What are you even doing? They're
Buy
like a quarter now. They've made 100 of these things.
Yeah.
They're incredible.
Unless they're unstable, still like $2 for an island.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Or old border foils, which I like. I know.
Expensive taste.
I know. Well, if you have expensive taste like me, you've got to protect those cards. You've got to go to ultrapro.com/command.
What a pro.
Bam! They've got sleeves, they've got deck boxes, they've got playmats, including the fancy new Fallout art playmats and sleeves. We have a couple of them in front of us. They're super fun. If you're a Fallout fan and you're going to get these decks, you can really bring the whole vibe together. I think that's the coolest thing about Universes Beyond for me is you can set a tone in a Magic game.
Yeah.
You're going to play a Lord of the Rings deck, you can have a Lord of the Rings playmat with Lord of the Rings sleeves, and Ultra Pro lets you do that because they have the exclusive access to Magic art, including this super sweet Universes Beyond art.
And these aren't even all of the playmats that I got to see on game nights. There's
so many
some
more
other
of them.
Very fun ones, and we're going to talk about this a lot, but very reverent of the universe and makes you feel like you're playing a Fallout/Magic game. It feels good.
Pick up all of those products. If you're into Fallout or just into Magic properties, they've got a lot of other things on there. Plus, they're high quality. They're going to keep your cards safe, and they're going to keep them organized. Again, ultrapro.com/command. The final way to support us is directly at patreon.com/commandzone. You get access to game nights and extra turns a day early without ads. You might see a special someone on this episode of Game Nights for Fallout. I don't know who it could be.
Who would they bring on who's both science and radiation adjacent who plays Magic? Who could say? Not me.
I don't know, but you get access to it a day early with ads.
Honestly, if you brought in someone else other than me, I would have texted Josh about it. Like,
we would have had to do a cutaway to you slowly weeping in your house.
What the hell?
Yeah, you get access to those a day early and without ads. There's super sweet perks to being a patron, including just being in our Discord and talking to all of us.
I sometimes respond to your messages.
Absolutely. You're in there hanging out sometimes.
Yeah. Ping me and I'll tell you what card to take out, even though it's your pet card.
Yeah. Take that one out. It's bad.
It's bad. 7 mana. Get it out of here.
Ugh. I'm just the opposite.
We don't
like,
play-
have you heard of this sweet 7 mana?
We don't play 7 mana cards anymore. Get them out.
Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode, and this one is dedicated to Taylor Palmer.
Woo!
You rock.
You got it, Tay.
All right, let's get into it. Today, our main topic is upgrading these 2 Fallout precons in front of us. But before we get into it, I want to talk about Fallout a little bit because you know it a lot better than I do.
Yeah, I've been a Fallout fan since, when did Fallout 3 come out? That's the game that I first got into the most. It was 2007, 2008? Something like that. So it's been almost 20 years, or 15 years rather. So I think I've dumped probably over 1,000 hours into the game series as a whole. I love.
Now you can dump even more in person.
Well, I worry now because I want to build like 3 different versions of each one of these decks. One in theme and one just, better than a precon. But yeah, so I've been a Fallout fan for years. I've worked directly with Bethesda in a science-y capacity before. I'm very involved with the universe. And spoiler alert, chat, I will tell you that these cards are extremely flavorful. They're very fun. And if you are a fan like me of any of the properties, not just the biggest games like Fallout 4, Fallout 3, but there's also a lot of Fallout New Vegas stuff in this set. There's Fallout 76 stuff in this set. That's what the Wise Mothman is from. You're going to like it no matter what aspect of the Fallout universe you enjoy.
I will say if you're super into Fallout, I did this for Lord of the Rings because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, is I built a battle box. I took all of the Fallout decks and I just put them, or I took all of the Lord of the Rings decks and I put them all in one box and I upgraded them as much as possible, all in universe. So there's not a main set for this that you can do quite as much stuff with, but if you want to do some rearranging, if you want to get some new commanders in the command zone and add any of the printings from the collector booster, it's a really fun way to keep the world together.
Yeah, I can absolutely see people doing that same thing that they did with Lord of the Rings. I have people in my playgroup that, and you probably know people in your playgroup that just have a Frodo deck or a Sauron deck that's all in universe. We'll get to some of these cards, but some of them are perfect build-arounds for just that.
Pretty cool. All right, let's get into this. We're going to upgrade these precons. We're going to add 10 cards. We're going to take 10 cards out. Of course, we're going to stay on a budget of $50. The first one we are going to upgrade is Science!
Eureka!
This is an energy, and it's an artifact deck. It's blue, red, white. It's Jeskai. It generates a ton of value, but it also uses artifact creatures to kind of smash face. It's robots.
Yes, big robots. So the face commander is Dr. Madison Lee, which you're seeing up here on screen, but you also have an alternate choice of Liberty Prime, recharged. Democracy is not negotiable.
Is that what he says? Oh, that's his flavor text. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's great.
Let's meet Madison Lee before we get into this.
Dr. Madison Lee is Jeskai. It's 1 blue, 1 red, 1 white for a 2/3. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, it's a human scientist, legendary creature. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get an energy. You can tap it and pay an energy. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample and haste until EOT. You can tap it and pay 3 energy to draw a card, or you can tap it to pay 5 energy. It's hard to count them
when there's
they're
that many.
Pay 5 energy to return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
I mean, this is an energy engine, so it makes energy when you cast artifacts, and then it's an outlet for that energy.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, you're going to have a lot of cheap artifact spells, but also probably some haymakers to reanimate from the graveyard with Madison.
Yeah, so this deck, as it's built, and we'll get into that, has a lot of those cheap mana rocks, things that you'd be looking for to synergize with this, but it doesn't actually have some of those giant artifacts and artifact creatures that you'd want to get continuous value out of, which is why I moved on from this card to the next card.
Liberty Prime recharged.
Communism identified. Destroying. Or something like that.
It's 2 blue, red, white. It's USA colors.
It's red, white, and blue. I do like that. There's some flavor there.
Or a legendary artifact creature robot with vigilance, trample, and haste. Are those America's keywords?
Yeah, it's kind of like Manifest Destiny.
Believe it or not, that's not the first Manifest Destiny reference we've made in the last couple of months on the podcast.
We took civics class.
See?
Yeah.
We know. Whenever Liberty Prime recharge attacks or blocks, sacrifice it unless you pay 2 energy counters. Then 2 tap, sacrifice an artifact, you get 2 energy and draw a card. So handy, Liberty Prime sort of pays for his own energy cost.
So what I like about Liberty Prime in comparison...
It's huge.
It's huge. In comparison to Madison Lee, it is an 8/8 Vigilance, Trample, Haste. In these Precon decks and in the, I'll say, more casual EDH meta, what I see happen too often for my liking is that games just dirtle and drag on too long, and no one has that big haymaker blow to win the game. That's what Liberty Prime is.
Haymaker, yeah,
so
for sure.
I was worried that playing this deck on game nights, if I went with Madison Lee, I would be generating energy, drawing some cards and stuff, but I'd just be doing that. I would just be kind of dirtling.
Yeah.
So with Liberty Prime, not only can you sacrifice artifacts, and then we'll get to some of those upgrades to take advantage of that, but you can sacrifice artifacts to draw a card for card advantage. It pays for itself, the energy cost to attack, so you don't actually have to go into heavy energy. There's not a lot of great energy cards. Sorry. But since there aren't, I didn't want to lean full on into that just in case. And this will take out someone with commander damage in 3 hits. And it has haste.
It is haste and trample built in. Like if you
and vigilance, so you can still do the effect of sacrificing and drawing. You can even sacrifice itself after you attack too. After
a board wipe, you can just swing with this thing right away, sacrifice like a mana rock after paying the mana for it, and just hit somebody for 8.
Bam.
It's a huge threat and a great way to rebuild in a grindier game.
Yeah.
Cool. I love this. So we're going to do this upgrade with Liberty Prime in the command zone because that is the way that Kyle played it on game nights.
It's what I recommend because I'm correct.
Because it's big. It's bad.
Oh, yeah, we throw.
And dangerous.
There's these, so I fell into the same problem with a card that's similar to this. Do you remember Sidri Galvanic Genius?
Boy, do I know the name. I can't picture it.
It's Esper. For like a 3/3, and it has artifact synergies. It's like for 1 mana.
Oh, give something lifelink, right?
Or Death Touch.
Sure, yeah.
Or animate a non-creature artifact into a creature artifact.
Right, yeah.
Right, there's so much text on it, it feels like there's so much you can do, but in practice, you just kind of dirtle and you don't, and that's too much mana to hold up.
Caltrops Death Touch over and over. Isn't this fun?
I'll take one. So that's why I went with Liberty Prime again. I didn't want to fall into that.
Very fun. All right, so we're going to get right into the best cards in this deck. This is how we've been getting to know the Precons, is just talking about the ones that when you draw them, you're like, wow, all right, we're moving online.
Yeah.
And you're familiar with this deck, so I'm going to let you talk about which cards you think are strongest in this deck.
Sure. So one that stands out to me immediately is Plasma Caster. It's 1 in a red for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever it attacks, you get 2 energy counters. You can pay 2 energy counters. I didn't actually do this because it's kind of a weird one, but you can pay 2 energy. Choose target creature that's blocking equipped creature. Flip a coin. If you win the flip, exile the blocking creature. If you win, otherwise it deals 1 damage to it. Equip for 2.
That's so weird. So, exile it or just pink.
So it is weird, and
it's good with trample.
It is very good with trample, and it's great in this deck specifically with Liberty Prime. Again, because it can pay for itself on its own attacks. I leaned away from energy, even though we're going to have some energy payoffs for upgrades, but I leaned away because I didn't want to rely on something that I couldn't reliably generate. So on attacks, Plasma Caster will pay for Liberty Prime's cost, and it still has vigilance, so it's not tapped, so you can still do all of your other stuff, and it makes it that much harder to block it. Remember, with trample, that does make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Because if it's blocked and then exiled with Plasma Caster, all of that damage gets through because it has trample.
What blocker?
Even though it is blocked.
Yeah.
That doesn't work without trample.
Yeah. It seems sweet with your commander, and again, with that super, super tight clock, that it's 3 hits and they are dead, being able to get rid of that blocker or even deal 1 damage to like trample over for 1 more damage does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it can change the clock entirely.
Yeah, no, exactly. The difference between 6 damage and 7 damage or 8 damage and 9 damage can be, like you said, it can reduce someone's expected life expectancy.
By
a whole turn. The next card that I think is great in this deck, and I used a lot, well, you'll see. but I used on game nights. Synth Eradicator. It is a 3/3 for 2 and a red. It's a synth soldier. A lot of great flavor here, even using the actual laser rifles that they have in the game from Fallout 4. It has haste. Whenever it attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may get 2 energy counters, or you can play this card this turn.
Ooh, nice. So it's card advantage or energy if you need it for your commander. 2
things that we want to be doing, 2 things that Liberty Prime is already doing. But I think most importantly here is tap it and pay 3 energy. Synth Eradicator deals 3 damage to any target.
Oh, it's also interaction.
So it's interaction, it's any target, it's using energy that if you're banking it up for some reason, maybe with Plasma Caster, you don't have Liberty Prime out, you have an outlet to use that energy, and it has haste. So it can do all of this right away. And with other cards in the deck, one nice little addition that I found was there's a clone in this deck, and by cloning this card, you have an automatic 6 damage laser rifle that you can point at anyone and just, bam, that creature's dead, you're down by 6, whatever. So I like that card a lot.
At instant speed, that kind of interaction is so powerful.
Instant speed,
because you can use it when you need to.
No, exactly. I mean, if you're generating enough energy, having a lightning bolt on a stick, that's
dangerous.
Good. That's very good.
Dangerous.
The next card I want to talk about a lot because it's flavorful is T45 Power Armor. Artifact equipment for 2, which I like. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters.
Great.
Again, we're looking for 2 energy counter generation to pay for Liberty Prime. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. We don't care because Liberty Prime has vigilance. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 1 energy. If you do, untap the creature, then put your choice of a menace, trample, or lifelink counter on it, equipped for 3.
Lifelink counter on this is awesome.
So I use this card to huge effect in the Game Nights episode. I was swinging for 11 with Liberty Prime more often than not. So having 11/11 trample coming at you, especially when it can get vigilance or lifelink and put me so far beyond killable, it's not going to matter anymore. That makes this card great specifically with Liberty Prime, even though he technically wouldn't be able to fit in this size of suit.
I was going to say, he's too big for that.
He's way too big for that. He's a big he's like 20, 30 feet tall in the game. So
I mean, he's got to be, right? Is this him behind Madison?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that's a little bit of scale.
We could do a scale. So if she's like 5 feet, then that's, he's probably 15, 20 feet tall, something like that.
5 feet? Madison.
What's the average height of a
woman? Like 5'6".
Back then.
Back then.
Irradiated.
Oh, I see. See, after all of the radiation, maybe we're much smaller.
I'm an engineer. I round down.
Yeah.
So if it's like 5'5" or less, it's 5 to me.
Yeah.
The next. Sorry,
I wanted to mention because I have a Voltron commander that's a 10/4, and the most important thing in the deck, it's Lord of Stressorhorn. It's very bad.
Oh, right.
But the most important thing in that deck is getting his power to 11, because changing the clock from 3 hits to 2 hits is game breaking.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden you go from having to have 9 connections with your opponents to win to having 6.
Yeah, and
so this is a very powerful equipment.
Yeah, reducing it to 2 hits and they're dead from commander damage also means Liberty Prime becomes removal at that point. They're not going to have enough toughness to block it, so they have to block. They usually have to double or triple block.
Yeah.
And then, okay, it dies, but at that point you have mana rocks. It has haste. Recast it. Come back in again. Really, really good.
Backbreaking. Cool.
And the last new card that I want to talk about that's extremely powerful in this deck, I know I kind of poo-pooed 7 CMC stuff, but mana value.
Unless it's great.
Is Wake the Past, which is a sorcery for 5, a red and a white. Return all artifact cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste. So this is like Open the Vaults, which is also in this deck. It costs 1 more than that, but this is one-sided. So put all artifact cards from your graveyard on the battlefield. They all gain haste. You're already doing that with Liberty Prime. You're sacrificing your artifacts. And what I like about these precons is that they do interact with each other in interesting ways. When you're going up against the Wise Mothman, who is also milling me during this process, I had a little well, you'll see in game nights.
Yeah,
but
no spoilers.
I had a little plan where, okay, well, if I take some rads, if I get milled a little bit and I have this card, maybe it doesn't matter so much. Maybe I'll be like, oh, no. So this is one of those haymaker cards.
Yeah.
It's one of those you should win the game after this kind of cards. And I don't think we have an effect like this in Magic yet. So it's usually symmetrical, right? From open the vaults to...
we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Some other stuff.
It's the why can't I Scrap Mastery?
Scrap Mastery, yes.
Yeah, is universal.
Is universal. So this is more costed, but you save it until you're ready to go for that robo-powered killing blow.
Yeah, this is a huge swing too, because you're like, I'm handled, I have no board.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they gain haste means you can go from being board wiped to being immediately the problem again, which is really, really powerful in any commander game, especially when you're playing sort of an artifacty sack loop deck. Your graveyard is a huge resorce.
Oh, especially with some
and
of
we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, especially some of the upgrades we're going to add. It will be even better with that. And I think as the meta moves towards, sorry, I'm talking like a competitive player, but as Magic and EDH moves towards more artifacts, more treasures, junk, food, clue, all of that stuff, I feel like players are figuring out that they need more artifact removal and disruption and all of that. So a card like this gets better in those contexts.
Right. A Vandal Blast can just blow a deck like this out.
Yes,
but you have to plan for that.
I've tried to make Karn Legacy Reforged like high power competitive. There are some cards that you just lose to.
Yep,
like that.
That's just part of it.
Can't lose if you got this one.
Yeah, you got a plan. Good thing you have a plan. So these are the decks that are the cards, that are the most mechanically powerful in the deck. If you draw them, you're like, okay, we are going to have a big moment. This deck is working.
Yeah.
Before we go too much further, I want to talk about the financial value in this product, like we always do. We're going to go through the notable reprints. By notable, I mean anything that's $5 or more. So these are cards that are annoying to buy and nice to have in your collection. In this deck, there are 3 of them. There's Lightning Greaves for $7.50. Panharmonicon for $7.50, and Treasure Vault, which is an artifact land, for $7. Speaking of Vandal Blast, dangerous.
Yes.
So those are the only 3 notable reprints in the deck. It's worth noting that, of course, these are universes beyond Precon, so they have fewer reprints than normal because they want to make space for more cool new Fallout cards, of course. This deck only has 49 reprints in it versus the usual 70 that like a regular set Precon tends to have.
I mean, think back when Commander first came out. It was first of all, it was all reprints, and then it was like 10, 15 new cards. So I mean, we're about to mention the fact, chat, that I know you're going to be commenting on. Where's all the reprint value? The average reprint value is $63.
Yeah.
That's not great. No. I agree. But in my opinion, as a Fallout fan, I want more new cards than reprinted cards. Yes, it would be great to have a crazy EV from each one of these decks, sure, but that's not why I'm personally buying it, and this is my opinion. We also don't know the value of what the new cards are going to be, so I know it is on the lower end of things, and I'm not trying to defend anything. I just know that having personally played these decks, I was happier with new stuff that did new things with brand new one-time art than I was seeing Panharmonicon again. So, okay.
Yep. These decks are currently pre-ordering for around $60, so obviously $63 of reprint value is very low. What we like to do with these decks that have lower reprints than normal is take that number and divide it by the number of reprints to give you the average value per reprint. It just gives you a better idea of the value, so we're not comparing 50 reprints to 70 reprints, and
that's not mathematically accurate.
Yeah, exactly. So we taking the 49 reprints It means that each reprint in this deck is worth an average of $1.29. That is very low as well. So it's significantly below the average price per reprint from 2023, which is $2.07. In fact, it's pretty close to the lowest price from 2023, which was the Growing Threat deck from March of the Machine. That was $1.22.
But again, in my opinion, it's not why I'm buying the deck,
right.
so it's not something I'm as concerned about. I would rather... I'm buying each one of these decks for the specific new cards or new commanders or something like that. And that's not necessarily like, that has a deflecting SWAT in it. Everyone buy it. That's not really...
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I think for these Universes Beyond decks, what people really want is the vibe. And it's like, if there's not room for really expensive reprints and they're not just shoehorning like stuff that doesn't really fit in the world, then I think that's a sacrifice people are often willing to make. But, if you're trying to pick these up for reprint value, if you're trying to buy cards and feel like you've made money off of this, these are not the products for you. All right, we are going to break down the deck into the
stats identified.
Good job. You really played on the fly there. I forgot to warn you about this.
Yeah, I didn't.
No, you nailed it. That was we're gonna break down.
You didn't tell me we were gonna do that.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Kyle's just ready. Woo! It just knows how stats is pronounced on this show.
Professional, baby.
So in this deck, there are 17 pieces of ramp. There are 16 pieces of draw, 10 targeted interaction spells, 1 board wipe, 36 lands, including 13 basic lands. And we wanted to split it up so we knew a little bit more of like the mechanics of this deck. There are 16 artifact creatures in this deck, and there's a couple of cards that care specifically about artifact creatures. And then there are 17 cards that produce energy counters. There are some that don't make energy, that use energy, but the ones that actually make energy are only 17. Okay, so all of that considered, this is a very interesting deck. So I guess before we go on, you played this deck on game nights without any spoilers. What do you think, just looking at the deck, that it needed right away?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I mentioned up at the top. I knew that since there are even with all these new cards, there's just not that many energy payoffs and energy producers in the same kind of way that you could take immediate crazy advantage of it, like a professional Facebreaker or a Dockside. There's not something that's like, create 10 energy or something like that.
Yeah.
So I knew I wouldn't be able to go crazy in the sciencey way that I'd want to, which is why I switched to Liberty Prime specifically. So in upgrading the deck, I wanted to take advantage of what Liberty Prime was going to do naturally without leaning so much into the energy while still keeping that theme around. With these two decks, and I'll probably say this again and again, upgrading them is harder than usual because being a Fallout fan and someone who's going heavy on these products, I wanted to keep some of the spirit of it, this card or that card isn't that great, but it's so cool.
Right.
And it's
that's just as important with these kind of decks.
And it's my favorite character, or it's my favorite companion from Fallout 4 or something like that. So with both of these upgrades, I'm trying to kind of walk that line between, all right, well, there are strictly better artifact interactions we can put in, but also bobbleheads are fun.
Bobbleheads are fun? I did want to mention there's one board wipe in this deck, and it's sort of a weird include, in my opinion. It's Austere Command, which is a very, very powerful board wipe, but in a deck that is specifically built around artifact creatures, Austere Command makes it very difficult for you to pick two that don't affect you, and I think that's why Austere Command is sort of more powerful, because like if you pick artifacts, you blow up all your creatures, and if you pick creatures, you also blow up most of your artifact creatures. So it's pretty difficult for you to use this board wipe in its most efficient, effective way. So I would consider maybe picking up some of the different board wipes and swapping
I think what happened, because I'm positive, is that they want something like a farewell in this slot, but people don't like farewell.
That's fair.
I love it. I think it's a fantastic card and more people should play it because let's get the game going.
I don't know if farewell gets the game going.
For me. Not for you. I'm playing this for me. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
With if you want to get rid of one or the other, say artifacts or creatures, it affects you more than other people at the table.
Yeah, because it's creature type, because it's like type based, and you have a lot of types on your creatures.
So not great.
A little weird.
I mean, even a Wrath of God or something like that might be.
Yeah, at least it's 4 mana and it hits everything.
It's cheaper. So it's not the best slot, but I've noticed.
But the art is awesome.
The art is awesome, and looking at the stats, I mean, and this podcast and Command Zone has been talking about this, how we've been moving away from board wipes more towards interaction.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be the craziest, best board wipe in the world when you're running 10 interaction,
it
which
just
is
kind
much
of
more.
does what you need it to do.
Yeah. It's basic.
Yeah,
but it's got good art.
I think before we get into the actual upgrade, this deck felt like you mentioned, there's not a lot of support for energy strategies as a whole. So if you want to raise the floor on the deck, you really want to make this deck more powerful, you lean into the artifact strategy of it. Especially this sort of like graveyard sacrifice to draw, to make energy, to do this.
Yeah.
You really want to fuel that engine, and that will fuel your energy.
Literally fuel Liberty Prime's engine.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and I don't know how many people love Brea out there, but I'm a longtime Brea player. Mm-hmm. And so upgrading this deck, I looked at that deck and was like, okay, it's one of the colors is off. But if you subtract black, I mean, what are the best artifact synergies that still work with sacrificing artifacts, which Brea does?
Yeah. And there's some cool ones. Let's talk about them. We're going to add 10 cards using a budget of $50, starting with some of the most powerful energy payoffs in the game.
Okay, so there are only really 2 good energy cards. There's only 2 good energy cards, and only one of them is actually good. The first one is Aetherworks Marvel, which is a legendary artifact for 4. It says whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, which you're doing, get an energy.
Nice.
Perfect. Then you can tap it and pay 6. Look at the top 6 cards.
6 energy.
6 energy, sorry. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library. Now, this is just an energy payoff card. It's getting free mana value off the top of your deck. It is so good that it had to be banned in Standard?
I think so.
It was banned in Standard when it was just getting Nulamog onto the battlefield for free and hitting people 1v1 with 10 exile the top 20 of your library.
This card's pretty absurd.
Yeah. Even if you don't do the second part, whenever you sack one of these cards, an artifact, you're drawing a card, getting an energy, you're already halfway to doing another attack or something like that. So it's perfectly synergistic.
It's also really good with like junk tokens and just a lot of the stuff that's going on in the Fallout. Stuff, because it's whenever a permanent you control goes to the graveyard. So if you're sacrificing treasures or junk or clues, this is excellent in those decks. But when you're making even more energy, this is a great place to put it. That is going to be really, really powerful at instant speed, right? You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost. Yeah. You do it right away. You can do it on end step. So powerful.
Yeah.
And it's only $2.75.
It's because it was banned. The next card is more of a haymaker card. It's Gonti's Aether Heart, legendary artifact for 6 mana. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, get 2 energy.
Huge.
Now that's absolutely perfect. It's pretty high costed at 6, but you can pay. Oh god.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6, 7, 8. You can pay 8 energy, exile it, take an extra turn after this one.
Sweet.
So especially in the cases that we were talking about where you're putting a serious clock on your opponents with an 8/8 with trample and haste and vigilance, taking an extra turn can win you the game like that easily. And I don't want to give spoilers, but
no spoilers.
But commander damage was incredibly significant in game nights.
It is relevant.
It is very relevant. So taking an extra turn is very good, and getting whenever another artifact ETBs get 2.
Yeah.
So that's really, really strong in this thing.
The fact that this is both an engine and a finisher for you means it is worth every penny, which is $4.50 for this one.
I will say that is where the energy stuff ends because
Endergy.
There are There's only 2 good energy cards, and these are them. And like I said, they're not even that great. So the next thing I wanted to do, again, looking at decks like Brea, which has traditionally been extremely strong, it does some of the same things as Liberty Prime. I wanted to take advantage of getting artifacts into the graveyard and then back out of the graveyard. So I added Daretti Scrap Savant, which is a legendary planeswalker, Daretti for 3 and a red. It can be your commander, but it's not going to be. You can plus it up for 2, comes into play with 3. And if you plus it up for 2, you draw up to 2 cards, then discard that many cards.
Reversed. Discard up to 2 and then draw that many.
It's worse than I said, but still good.
Still good.
You can choose the artifacts in your hand that you want to reanimate later, discard them up to 2, and then draw up to 2. It's -2. You can sacrifice an artifact. If you do, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is super, super strong. If you have something like a higher costed Gonti's Heart or something in your hand, pitch it to the graveyard. Next turn, get it right back. Or anything that you're sacrificing with Liberty Prime is always on your next turn able to possibly come back. Especially if there's... This isn't in our list, but if you're thinking about something like a Worm Coil Engine is a nightmare in a deck like that.
Yeah, you mentioned that you can sack Liberty Prime to itself here, so you could do some interesting stuff where you're like, okay, I really do need the card with Liberty Prime. I'm going to sack it to itself, draw a card, and then swap a land for a Liberty Prime later. I guess you could have just sacked that artifact.
And then it has haste.
And then it has haste, so you can attack.
Immediately come back and do that damage. It's really, really strong. Then it's ultimate, it's -10. You get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. If you ever played with Planeswalkers, you know that's never going to happen, but it's always a threat. Daretti is just good. Daretti is just great in this deck. It's doing what you want to do. It's putting artifact cards in your graveyard, which you'll see. We also have additional ways to abuse, but then it's taking cards that you might be sacrificing with Liberty Prime, putting them right back out there.
Yep, and it's only 75 cents after a couple of reprints. Welcome back, Daretti.
Daretti is good.
This next one is a huge one and goes with this whole package. So, like, the Daretti sort of sets the tone for the rest of these cards. And we're starting with Goblin Engineer. It's 1 and a red for a Goblin Artificer. When it enters the battlefield, search a library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. It's an Entomb an artifact card. Then red, tap, sack an artifact, return target artifact card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can bring back little things.
Yeah, you can see how this gets out of control very quickly. Not in this deck, I don't think, but cards like Mycosynth Wellspring and that other one that looks like Goop Bubbling, or is that the Goop Bubbling one?
I think that's the Goop Bubbling one.
That's the Goop Bubbling one. But artifact cards at ETB draw you a card, or when it dies, you draw a card, something like that.
Yeah.
If you can do that every turn, you're just going to start running away with the game.
And this deck has a couple of like ETB creatures that just make 2 energy. So you can use those ETBs and start like, I'll trigger this one's ETB, then I'll sack it and bring back the other one. Trigger that ETB, and I'll sack that and bring back the other one. The loop-de-doops get very powerful. And even though it can only bring back smaller artifacts, note that you can put any artifact card from your library into the graveyard, which works with Daretti, and it works better with the next card, maybe the best card in the deck after upgrades. It's Goblin Welder, which is 1 red for a 1/1. Choose target artifact a player controls and target artifact card in that player's graveyard. If both targets are still legal as this ability resolves, they left all that. That player simultaneously sacrifices the artifact and returns the artifact card to the battlefield. That's the errata text, wouldn't you believe it?
So it's a mini Living Death, and there's an artifact Living Death in a second. But this can be the best card in any artifact deck. Being able to actually loop for free 2 artifacts every single turn when they are cards like, Aetherflux Marvel or any of these other busted artifacts that can be in the deck. Heck, swing with Liberty Prime.
Yeah.
Sack Liberty Prime. Get your Solemn back into play.
Yep.
Put a land back onto the battlefield. Next turn, bring him back out. Hit again because he has haste.
Yeah.
It can get and draw a card off of Solemn.
Keeping your commander safe in the graveyard is pretty funny. He's got haste. He doesn't have to live on the battlefield.
It is relevant for game nights.
Yeah.
I do not pay as much commander tax as I have to in that game. But Goblin Welder, I think it's our most expensive card easily at $18. But I think if you play with a card or if you have played with a card, you know it's just extremely strong.
Yeah. Goblin Engineer, his little brother, is $5. I don't think I said that.
He's fair Goblin Welder.
He's fair Goblin Welder. He's his little brother. And Big Brother, I don't know. It's Scrap Mastery. It's 3 red for a sorcery. Each player exiles all artifact cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all artifacts they control, then put all the cards they exiled this way onto the battlefield. You switch all your artifacts in the graveyard for your artifacts on the battlefield. This is super powerful because your commander has a sack outlet. Anytime you have a sack outlet, it's really good with these living death type effects because you can sacrifice everything that you have on the battlefield, put it in your graveyard, then cast this. They're all back.
Yeah. And just the way the deck is built, you will reliably have more artifacts in the graveyard than your opponents. So even though they might get back a
Wayfarer's Bauble
or something like that. Yeah, exactly. You're getting back your commander and all these other synergistic cards and these energy producers and all these other cards that you can take more advantage of than other players. So it's just good. It's like Wake the Past that we talked about is one of the coolest new cards in this deck, but it's even cheaper, and it's a real haymaker of a card.
For sure. It's only $3 too.
Yeah. Next card, I think, goes in any artifact deck that has Izzet colors. It's Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, which is a legendary creature, human artificer, which is a 3/3. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas.
You know what this deck is full of?
Artifacts.
And legends.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. This is kind of when I was putting together the upgrades, this is kind of like a boring upgrade, but it's just so good. I mean, if you've ever played against this deck, like a Joyra deck, you know how insane it is. So even though it's not an artifact, she's not an artifact herself, you play a Soul Ring, draw a card.
She knows how to use them.
You tap that, you play an Arcane Signet, you draw a card. It's nuts. Yeah. It's just very, very good.
She's only $2.50, Miss Joyra. Another powerful artifact sack outlet. It's Kuldotha Forge Master. For $5, it's a 5-mana 3/5 construct with tap, sack 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact card, and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library.
Get the best card in your deck, put it out there. Get Gonti's Heart. Put it out there, take an extra turn immediately.
For the small cost of 3, and you can sack Kuldotha itself, which is worth noting. So you really only need 2 artifacts on the battlefield, and you can slam this, tutor something to the battlefield. And now you've loaded up your graveyard full of sweet artifacts that you can weld in and out with your new
Get them back, Scrap Mastery, Deredium back out, Goblin Welder back out. It's oftentimes when it comes down, it's a must-destroy threat.
For sure.
And in these decks, I think artifacts have just been getting better and better and better in their synergies. What I wanted to do when I was playing on game nights was run out some threats specifically so that they didn't know what to focus on, my opponents. And Kuldotha is one of those. You can't activate it immediately, but you can't let it activate next turn. So,
and if you cast a Wake the Past, and they all have haste, and then you activate them right away and tutor something else into the battlefield, pretty...
Game over at that point.
Kuldotha Forge Master is $5 and worth it. The next one's really cool. I haven't seen it in a deck in a while.
No, really? This is one of my favorite cards of all time. One of my favorite arts of all time. I didn't know that was Brea until I thought about it for 1 second. Yeah, that's Brea.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. There's not a lot of ladies that are missing their whole mid.
Yeah. She makes a statement when she walks in the door. Her name is Master Transmuter. She's 3 and a blue for a 1/2 human artificer artifact creature. Noted. For 1 blue and tapping it, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. You may put an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you have any good ETBs, this is good. It is not only can you get great ETBs each turn, this is great commander protection.
Instant speed,
and note that you don't have to put a different card from your hand back onto the battlefield.
So that's a fun trick.
So you can, if your commander is in danger, it's effectively a blink. And the target will fizzle because it's a different card. So someone goes to path your Liberty Prime, boop,
boink.
boop. doesn't work anymore.
And now it's untapped, so I can sack it.
I've used that card in one of my first commander decks was a Sharoom the Hegemon deck. Oh. And when you can do that every single turn, it is nuts. But just a very, very good card, especially if you're adding in other higher end ETB dollar value kind of stuff like a Wormcoil Engine or oh crap, what is Cityscape Leveler an ETB?
Cast trigger.
Okay.
It's cast attack.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Well, and neither's Wormcoil Engine. Wormcoil's dies trigger, but there's you've got Solemns in this deck. You've got a lot of ETB.
I was thinking of Goblin Welder again. What am I thinking
This
of?
is to hand and then back.
Portal to Phyrexia would ruin everyone's day.
Gross.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
You'd introduce Phyrexia to Fallout.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's already destroyed here. We're actually going to go somewhere else. The final card in this upgrade is Master Transmuter is only $1.
Yeah.
The final card in this upgrade is one of the best artifact creatures, maybe the best ever printed. It's
all artifact creatures.
Rexian Metamorph. And all artifacts. It's a clone. And it's an artifact creature, and you can pay 3 and a Phyrexian, so usually it's just 3 mana and a couple of life to get this thing on the battlefield. You can't clone your commander with it, of course, because it's legendary, but you can clone most of the other stuff in this deck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sweet robots. There's a lot of, you could clone any of your welders to get that stuff moving. You could get a lot of the cards that we talked about, right?
Yeah. And I'm going to talk to the more spicy among you.
Uh-huh.
It's the One Ring world now. It's in every single deck. That means you have an extra copy.
There you go.
Because Phyrexian Metamorph can be a copy of any artifact, you get a One Ring if someone else gets a One Ring. And it's one of the most busted cards printed in many years. From my perspective, that's where Phyrexian Metamorph can really pay off. Mm-hmm. But if not, it's any of your artifacts and...
being able to weld clones in and out, too, is really cool. You can reuse ETBs on the board. It's a really cool thing to use with Master Transmuter because no matter what you clone, it is still an artifact. So you can still do all of these cool artifact tricks with it.
Yeah, and I didn't put in an Arkham Dagson or something like that. But I wanted to.
You almost did.
I almost did.
There's a lot of direct to the battlefield stuff. You don't need Arkham Dagson.
He's just better.
Yeah, probably. The total budget, though, you did a great job. You're right under $50 at $48.50. Using the whole buffalo.
When I sent you the list and I put it into a mass entry thing, and it was exactly $50 with shipping. I was like, wow, man, I'm so good at cards. Damn.
I know. Pricing.
I know. Pricing.
There was one other card that you mentioned when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
That would be cool to add.
Yeah, if we're just going to go all in on sacrificing artifacts in the graveyard, recurring them, you're going to have a lot of artifacts in your graveyard. I just thought I would mention a card that I've always wanted to play but never play. But it might be good in this deck. It's Mirrodin Besiege, which is an enchantment for 2 and a blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose one of these modes. Mirrodin, whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless artifact creature token.
Nice.
Sack it, draw a card at Liberty Prime.
There you go.
Great. Or, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card, which is just good. That's just good. That's almost Monarch. Then, if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses.
Got him.
I haven't been able to do it. I want to do it.
I have seen somebody die to this.
I want to door to nothingness somebody. So I think this could be, it's probably cheap, but I think this is another card that you can think of if you are filling up your graveyard with stuff, especially if you're going up against a deck. Maybe someone's playing a Wise Mothman.
There you go. A Miller. You're a serial Miller.
It's Miller time.
It's Millen. Millen like a villain. All right, we've added 10 cards to this deck. Now we've got to do the hardest thing in Commander. We've got to cut them. 10 of them.
Now, I will say that this cutting process was pretty easy.
Yeah, there are definitely some cards that you're like, doesn't work here. This doesn't
work. This isn't on theme. But what I will say going into this is that line I've been trying to walk where I didn't want to cut all the flavorful cards or put in too many cards that aren't flavorful. Even though we're cutting these because I think they're not good in this deck, they're still all fun and they all have great art. I just think it doesn't work in the deck. They're just superseded by other stuff. One example I'm going to go to immediately because I'm thinking about it is Expert Level Safe, which is an artifact for 2. When it enters the battlefield, exile the top 2 cards of your library face down. Pay 1, tap it. You and target opponent each secretly choose 1, 2, or 3. Then those choices are revealed. If they match, sacrifice it and put those exile cards into your hand. Otherwise, exile the top card of your library face down.
Mm-hmm. The stakes get higher each time.
But you both have to like choose the correct combination to this safe for you to unlock the cards. It's fun. It's super fun. If it's an expert level safe, you know exactly what they're referring to in the game, in the lockpicking mini game. It's just unreliable card draw. And it's not good.
Yeah.
If you can't control that you are going to get two cards or not, I mean, you could politic with somebody. I mean, that's another fun part of this. Is like,
can you?
Well, you say say secretly.
It says secretly.
I guess is that a rule violation technically?
I don't know. Secretly is a new thing they've been using a lot, and it does introduce some sort of strange politics at the table.
Yeah. What if you announce it to the table and it's like, okay, you can't do that? It's like, well, I already did it. I did. That's what I'm going to do.
You going to make talking illegal? What do you mean?
Do I lose?
I don't know.
That's weird.
I don't know. We'll have to
if you're a judge in the comments,
let us know how secretly is treated. That's a very interesting question.
It's supposed to be a secret. That's weird. But it's just not very good.
The next card we're cutting is Brotherhood Vertibird.
Brotherhood Vertibird.
This is a vehicle with flying, and its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. It's got crew 2. It's a pretty good artifact. But this deck isn't exactly going wide with artifacts. You're sacking a lot of them. You're kind of stuff going in and out. You've got one big guy. So he's going to be what, like I don't know, maybe a 5/4 flying?
Yeah,
maybe.
It's not going to be big enough to. You already have the beater in the command zone.
Right.
You're not going heavy in on, like you said, going wide with a lot of attacking creatures or creatures that you can tap. You want to use their abilities for something else, not crewing Brotherhood Vertibird. So it's just it's fine. It'll probably go.
Playing like a treasure or a clue deck, and you have like 30 of those.
Well, this will probably go into my Shorakai deck.
There you go. Sweet.
Because vehicles are cool. But other than that, doesn't really fit with what we're doing.
No bird. Next one is Camp. C-A-M-P.
It is an artifact fortification. Is that a new?
No. It's returning silliness.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's weird. Whenever a fortified land is tapped for mana, you may put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. If that creature shares a color with the mana that land produced, create a junk token, and you can fortify for 3.
So it's 3 to cast, 3 to like equip to a land is basically what it might mean.
6 mana for +1/+1 and a junk?
Yeah. For the first one, yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot of mana to pay. Junks are very powerful. If you haven't read about them, when you sack a junk token, you impulse draw until the end of turn. That's very powerful, but to pay 6 mana to do that the first time is not quite efficient enough.
No. Yeah, there's any number of baubles and other small artifacts you could use for this exact same thing. Even though, again, it is in-universe theme, the art is fun, but just not good enough for me.
It's also not very good to
not good enough for
in
me.
And out. Get it out!
Get it out of here.
Speaking of not very good, it's over encumbered.
Yeah, this card is not good.
1 and a white for an enchantment aura. Enchant opponent. When it enters the battlefield, enchanted opponent creates a clue token, a food token, and a junk token. At the beginning of combat on enchanted opponent's turn, that player may pay 1 for each artifact they control. If they don't, creatures can't attack this combat. So you give them 3 artifacts to babysit, and they have to pay 3 for them in order to attack. Or they just use the free value you gave them.
They can draw a card,
gain 3 life,
impulse
or
a card,
impulse a card,
and gain 3 life, and then just keep this on their creature.
They're probably not attacking anyway.
So it's
not very good.
I mean, it's slightly better than pacifism, I guess, because it gets all of their creatures that they can't control.
Yeah,
but
it's like tech against artifact decks is what it is.
But we're an artifact deck.
We're an artifact deck.
No, give me that stuff.
I want it.
Can I enchant? Oh, and I can't enchant myself.
Nope, opponent.
I can't be over encumbered.
Nope.
I'm too burly of a robot.
Yeah, this goes somewhere else, I think, or maybe nowhere else.
Yeah, I don't think it's good, but it is a direct reference to something in the games that are fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fun, but it's not very good.
It made me sad that you cut this next one because he's a little cutie.
Well, it's, again, this card is very cool, and I like it in the game.
It's not very good.
It's just not good in this deck at all. Even worse than the other ones. It's Red Death Shipwrecker, which is a crab mutant for 1 red and 1 blue. It's a 1/3. It has alluring eyes. Go to target creature an opponent controls. That player draws a card. You gain a red. So this is a very political, interesting card where you can tap it and make something of your opponents attack someone other than you, and you add a red, but you're giving them a card. So it's kind of built for that. It's this trade-off, right? Like, you're going to have to attack with your mana dork or whatever. Well, they would just tap, tap it in response. I'm going to make you attack with a card you don't want to attack with.
Yeah.
But you get a card. Hey, isn't that good? But you're adding a red. So I never want to give opponents free cards.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not that good.
But
it can go somewhere else. It seems fun. It just does literally nothing that we want.
Yeah. It's also not an artifact.
Get a crab out of you.
This next one does a little bit of what we want. It's the Mother Lode Excavator. 3 red for a legendary artifact creature robot. When this enters
good. You say robot too.
When this enters the battlefield, choose target opponent. You get an amount of energy counters equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. Whenever it attacks, you may pay 4 energy. When you do, destroy target non-basic land of any player controls, I guess, and creatures that player controls without flying can't block this turn. I get it. Okay. It makes a bunch of energy on ETB.
Or not.
Or it makes some energy on ETB.
You know.
1 or 2.
Target opponent, not each opponent.
Yeah, you pick somebody with non-basics. So,
but how much, when this is 5 mana, when it comes down, they might have 2 or 3?
3, 4? Yeah. So not a great rate.
It should have been, to be very, very good, it would be something like that red card for the same mana cost that makes mana.
Mana Geyser?
Mana Geyser. Mana Geyser is much better than this, even though you want energy. It's just not making energy at the rate of something like a Gonti's Heart, which is just 1 more, or Aether Flux Marvel, which is 1 less. And I don't think you want to spend that amount of energy into this effect that's weird, and I don't think it's going to do anything. You want to spend it charging up your giant robot. So
for sure. And draw on magic cards.
It's cool, but I don't think it's very good. There's no good energy cards. There's no. All the best energy cards are either those 2 that we mentioned or Madison Lee and Liberty Prime. That's about it.
The way they did vaults is very cool, I think.
I do like the idea of having each vault, which Fallout players know, each one kind of has its own contained story. Even if it's not like an official mission, there's something going on in each vault. The ideas behind the vaults is that Vault Tech set them all up secretly to be both vaults, but experiments, that they experiment on the vault dwellers, do some science on them. So it's very fun to see some of those specific stories from the games replicated in these sagas, but they're sagas. And it's not exactly what we want to be doing. The first one is Vault 13, Dweller's Journey. 3 and a what? You know what sagas do. For each player, exile up to 1 other target enchantment or creature that player controls until it leaves the battlefield. Next lore counter, you get 2 life and you scry 2. Meh. Next lore counter, return 2 cards, exile with Vault 13 to the battlefield under their owner's control and put the rest on the bottom of their owner's libraries. So it removes something and then you scry and then you give them back.
Yeah, it also hits your own thing, which is sort of strange.
For each player,
it's for each player. It's up to 1.
Up to 1. You can choose 0.
So it's like a slow blink, I guess. You can hit 1 thing for each player, and then you give all but 1 of them back at the end of the story. It's interaction. That's kind of fine. But the thing, like you said, it's a saga. This is an artifact deck. We're doing something else.
No, I mean, Grasp of Fate is cheaper than this and better than this. The other one that's not Grasp of Fate, but the one with the centaur on it, that's Grasp of Fate. What's the other one, Chad?
That's the one with the with chat.
You know what I'm talking about.
Do you think there's people in the camera?
Yeah. Are there not? It's Grasp of Fate is better, even though this is fun and flavorful. It's just not doing the kind of removal that we want. Don't give it back to them. Make them
You've already taken
Make them work for it. Sagas destroy themselves. Make them spend some removal on it.
The next saga that we're removing is Vault 112. This is more interaction, and it does kind of generate energy. The first 2 chapters are tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. You get 2 energy. That happens twice. Then the third one is pay any amount of energy. If you paid 1 or more energy this way, shuffle your library, then exile that many cards from the top. You may play one of those cards without paying its mana cost. It's a slow energy engine, but again, this is an artifact deck. Putting 4 mana enchantments in your artifact deck just kind of gunks up your synergy.
No, they have to be really good if you're doing that. They have to be something like Open the Vaults, which becomes a Tolarian college. Wait, I'm thinking of the professor.
You are having a stroke.
I know. No, Tolarian Academy, which is banned.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a great artifact-based...
That one's not called Open the Vaults, though.
No, I said Storm the... Oh, my God. It's hot in here.
We're also cutting Open the Vaults. That's next.
It's hot in here.
It is.
Play Storm the Vault instead.
Yeah, Storm the Vault's great. It makes treasure tokens.
Holy crap. I'm going to... Here, I'm going to come back right now.
You can do it, yeah.
The next card that we're cutting is Open the Vaults for 4 and 2 white, which is a sorcery. Return all artifact and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. I think I kind of mentioned this in relation to Wake the Past.
Yeah.
But since we have a card like Wake the Past, which is one-sided, and it only costs 1 more, I don't want to also have Open the Vaults that might... if I'm going for that strategy, give my opponents unnecessary advantage.
A whole bunch of value. Plus, we just added a lot of recursion for artifacts. We really don't need another huge reanimation effect like this.
It's a non-bow with scrap mastery and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, we want to be taking advantage more than our opponents.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, the final card that's getting cut is Robo-Brain Warmind. That's his name.
It is cool, though.
3 and a blue for a robot. When he enters the battlefield, you get an amount of energy equal to the number of artifact creatures you control. So it makes some energy when it comes in, as long as you are doing well. His power is equal to the number of cards in your hand, and when he attacks, you may pay 3 energy. If you do, draw a card. It's not...
It's slow. It's not going to be that big. It's going to be... at best case scenario, a 7/5, which is scary, but it doesn't have trample. We already have trample. You don't want to be paying 3 energy to draw a card if I could rather pay 2 mana and draw a card and create 2 energy with Liberty Prime. So it's fun. I love seeing a Robo-Brain in these cards. I just don't think it's as good as other stuff.
I don't like 4-drops that are only good if you're already doing the thing. If you already have a lot of cards in your hand and you already have a lot of artifact creatures on the board, you're doing great. What is this doing for you? That is a thought on that.
Especially because we're leaning away from energy a little bit.
That too. We don't need a huge amount of energy generators. We've got a lot of them already. All right. So those are the 10 cards we're taking out to make space for the 10 cards we put in. We've upgraded the Science Precon, and we will get back to it after we upgrade the Mutant Menace Precon, which we will do after a few words from our sponsors.
Detective Alquist Proft, personal notes. The case of the fast feast. It was a stormy Friday night when Tessa Karloff wandered into my office, asking the impossible.
I'm looking to eat opulently, but I only have 2 minutes to cook.
2 minutes? I could crack a case in 2 minutes. But a full meal?
Have I finally stumped Ravnica's greatest detective?
Not yet. You forgot to factor in one thing. Factor. They deliver chef-crafted meals right to your door that are ready to eat in only 2 minutes. And with over 35 pre-prepared options each week, including vegetarian and calorie-smart, Factor has truly solved making upscale dining fast and easy. Plus, Factor won't cost you all your treasures and tithes. It's less expensive than takeout, and even offers the flexibility of letting you pause or reschedule anytime. My favorite meal is the smoky Gouda chicken. Delectable restaurant quality from the comfort of my dimly lit office. Here, dig in.
Could it possibly be that simple? Just heat and eat? This is to die for.
Head to factormeals.com/command50 and use code command50 to get 50% off. That's code command50 at factormeals.com/command50 to get 50% off.
All right, I will untap. I'll draw a card. Hey, have you guys seen Jimmy in the past 2 weeks?
I think he left with a big backpack and said he had important company business.
Oh, bad news, guys. I went door to door in Burbank and sold almost no Command Zone merch.
Why would you do that? We already sell stuff super easily on Shopify.
Oh, yeah.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're working out of your friend's apartment or from a full office suite, Shopify is there to help you grow. I mean, you remember, when we started the podcast, we weren't even thinking about merch. But when fans started asking for it, Shopify made it easy. They handled the selling so we could focus on the content. There's a reason Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. They've got great customer service, useful tools for your business, and the internet's best converting checkout system. So you never have any trouble turning browsers into buyers.
Man, that's way better than what I was doing.
Wait, did you actually sell anything?
No, but I did see Timothy Chalamet at the gas station. He didn't see me.
Sneaky Timmy.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/TCZ, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/TCZ now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/TCZ.
Browsing for some new tech?
Yeah, I'm building T-Mount and ARCHIDEKT. Ooh, how about Zergo and Ojutai?
Did you just drag and drop that card image directly into your deck?
Yep, with ARCHIDEKT, you can drag and drop card images from EDH, Rec, or Scryfall directly into the deck list. No typing required.
That is so cool.
Ooh, okay, check this out. I'm gonna drag and drop Dragon Storm into the deck, and then boom, I'm gonna drop a bunch of dragons on the battlefield.
A 9-drop, huh? Seems ambitious.
It was just for the pun. ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/commandzone.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking Fallout. We're talking precons. We're pumping up the power level. And up next, we are upgrading the Mutant Menace Precon. So this is what? This is Sultai? Yeah, it's green, blue, black. We're doing some rad counter stuff.
Yes.
We're doing some self-mill. We're doing some +1 counter stuff, some big burly beastie stuff. But before we get into the deck, I want to talk about rad counters because this is like a new Fallout mechanic.
Yeah, rad counters are interesting. It's going to take some time for you to get used to what rad counters do because, which is something that I like as a sciencey person, they go away.
Yeah,
they remove themselves, like Half-Life. It reduces over time. Radioactive things decay. Anyways, radiation triggers at the beginning. Well, you get radiation counters from something like Wise Mothman. And then at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you count how many radiation counters you have, mill that many cards.
So let's say I have 5 radiation counters, I mill 5.
Mill 5. Stop. Then for each non-land card among those milled, lose 1 life and lose 1 rad counter.
So let's say I milled 3 non-lands, I will lose 3 life, and now I only have 2 rad counters.
And those rad counters stay, and then they will mill you for 2, and the next time, unless they get proliferated or added or something like that.
Yeah, worth noting that these are counters on the player. They can be proliferated. There is a bit of a proliferate sub-theme in this deck.
Yeah.
So we're doing all kinds of countery things.
And that is the hard part about upgrading this deck, knowing where
split,
knowing where to go. So there are mutant synergies, there's +1/+1 counters, there's rad counters, there's from the graveyard mill stuff. So it's doing a lot of separate things.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do for the upgrade is lean into, instead of 4 of them, maybe 2 of them.
Yeah, let's meet the commanders and see which direction we are going. The first one is the face commander. It is the Wise Mothman. You said this is from New Vegas?
This is from 76.
76,
and
a new one.
It strikes me that if you had bright lights inside of your compound eyes, you wouldn't be able to see that well.
Science.
Anyway.
Science! With an exclamation point.
That's why I played the other day. I couldn't grok this one at all.
The Wise Mothman is 1 black, green, and a blue for a 3/3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. Whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. So the wording on this is kind of funky. It's
the least good version of what you're thinking.
Yes. It's not X counters on anything. It's 1 counter on X creatures.
Yes.
So if they mill, let's say they mill 10 cards and 7 of them are non-land cards, great, good hits. You have to have 7 creatures to maximize that. You can only, it is up to
yes.
7. So if you only have 5 creatures, you put 1 counter on each creature.
And the rest are wasted. Kind of. You can put counters on other people's creatures if you're feeling like losing the game.
Look at that. If you want to get hit.
But you can do that.
Each of up to X target creatures. You sure can.
Put them on someone's Esper Sentinel.
Help them out.
Great idea.
Get it killed faster. So this is milling everybody with rad counters.
Yes.
And it's buffing your creatures. So we're
Yes.
doing sort of the counter stuff of this deck.
But similarly to a Liberty Prime in my mind, why I like the Wise Mothman, and we'll get to the other possible commander here, but why I like the Wise Mothman specifically is that it generates rad counters. It's not just ETB, it's on attacks as well.
Yep.
So if I want to go into a radiation strategy, which I do because that's how I make my living sometimes, then I have a commander that lets me do that. But in the best case scenario, after one turn cycle, this is a 7/7 flyer.
Huge.
And then we have the exact same thing as Liberty Prime. We have evasion on a creature that can kill someone in 3 turns. So I want to be able to have that, because we're kind of split all over the place, I want the option of just hit you.
Bug is threat.
Bug is threat. Bug smash you.
Bug smash. But if you're not interested in Bug Smash, you can also look at the Master Transcendent. He is yucky looking.
Yeah, he is gross.
1 black, green, blue for a 2/4 mutant. He's a legendary artifact creature. When it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters. The target is probably you. Then it has an activated ability that says, tap, put target creature in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control. It's a green mutant with base power and toughness 3/3. So if a creature was milled, you can activate this and reanimate it. You could do that if you're milling your opponents as well. If you're milling them and they hit something cool, you can reanimate it. But it's hard to know what your opponent's decks are doing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to build a deck around their deck.
So I can definitely see the argument, chat, that this card might be better than Wise Mothman. I can see it be very strong in a mill strategy if you are specifically milling out your opponents and then getting a creature. But for the radiation strategy, it doesn't work for me, which is what I want to lean into, because it can't consistently generate rads. It's only on ETB. So if they mill 2 non-land cards and those radiation counters go away, then I don't have any consistent millability from that. Millability. This is more of a choice, personal choice, and deck building choice than I think the other deck was, where I think Liberty Prime is quite better. But these two are more or less on the same level, where you can easily see how the Master would be busted.
I did want to mention, with the Master Transcendent, we did note that this deck has a +1/+1 counter sub-theme. That does not go with the Master Transcendent at all. And there is a pretty good chunk of this deck that is dedicated to it, which we will talk about in a little bit. If you put the Master in the command zone, you're probably going to require a little bit more upgrading to sort of make it more of a reanimator self-mill strategy than you are with the Mothman.
But if you were to take out the Master into a full separate mill shell, I can see it being much better. But
I agree.
But not much better in this upgraded Precon.
Right. Cool.
Like if Phoenix was in there and stuff like that. Whew.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Seems busted. Okay, so let's talk about the best cards in this deck. Get to know it a little bit better. The first one I wanted to talk about is 6 mana, and it's sweet. It sounds so busted. It's Screeching Scorch Beast. For 4 black for a bat mutant. It's a 5/5 with flying and menace. When it attacks, each player gets 2 rad counters.
Yes.
Great. Self-mill, mill for the table. Then, whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, you may create that many 2/2 black zombie mutant creature tokens. Do this only once each turn.
Okay, so Magic has been learning to add this clause to many cards so they don't get as broken as some older cards.
Right.
But given that it's one of the only cards that still keeps the brokenness of that many.
Right. It's that many, but it's also with rad counters, it's not as limiting as you'd think, because this player's milling, this player's milling, this player's milling, this player's milling.
Again, and
so it's 4 times a rotation. It's not just on your turn.
No, and again, think about it like I said with the Wise Mothman, best case scenario on ETB then becomes a 7/7. Best case scenario, play this. I mean, you could have an additional 6 power 8 power on your board by the time it gets back around to you.
Yeah.
So then you put 13 power on the board, and as flying and menace, 2 forms of evasion. I think it's really, really good in this deck specifically, especially when you're putting +1/+1 counters on your flyers too.
And it gives you all of these tokens to use your extra milling, so you can put more counters on all your zombies. So you're maximizing the value from the Mothman.
It's made
really good.
It's definitely perfect in this deck.
All right, up next.
Up next is the most flavorful and probably best card in this deck out of the new cards in this deck is Nuclear Fallout. It's X and 2 black for a sorcery. Each creature gets twice -X until end of turn.
Sweet.
Each player gets X rad counters. So that twice is deceptive. You think you're paying a lot of mana into this, but you're not actually. I mean, for a rate of just 2, so a total CMC of 4.
Like Damnation.
Each creature's getting -4/-4.
Pretty good.
Which is a languish. And people play languish, and languish is good. But then you're also adding to your radiation strategy.
Right.
This also gets rid of indestructible creatures, which matters against the Hail Caesar deck. If you're playing these decks against each other, it can give legendary human creatures indestructible. So this is a really good board wipe that does exactly what you want to do. It might take out a couple of your own creatures, but the rad counters are what you'd be trying to get at in that situation. And you might have big butted flyers at that point.
Yeah, you are buffing your team, so it's possible you could just pick off all the little guys that are in your way.
Yeah.
Something interesting about this, I do think that this card is very flexible and is going to see a lot of play outside of Fallout because it's really good in decks that are eating out of their opponent's graveyard, that are doing like Rise of the Dark Realms type stuff. There's not a lot of ways that are not solely dedicated to it to mill a bunch of people all at once.
I could see you playing this in Mimeoplasm.
It's great in Mimeoplasm.
In Muldrotha, all of those Sultai graveyard decks.
Really
cool. I think it's really good in that. And like you said, I think it will. This is one of the cards it looks like will definitely jump out of the Fallout and maybe into other stuff. It's no One Ring, but
still pretty sweet.
But it's good.
We mentioned him already. The Master Transcendent's going to be very powerful in this deck. As long as you can get the mill engine online, it's reanimating the best creature. Not necessarily the best because you do have to like pull the trigger at some point.
It has to be this turn.
Yeah.
But creatures in Magic are getting better and better and better in every single set. I mean, even if you're grabbing, you can be grabbing these low mana value creatures that are still...
grab an Esper Sentinel, now it's a 3/3.
That's extremely strong. I mean, even just grabbing someone's Birds of Paradise or something, it's a 3/3.
It's free.
It's very good. But the art is gross.
It's yucky. Don't look at it. It's yucky. He's like a TV with skin.
Do you do that?
Why?
There's some cards that I don't play or don't build around because I don't like them.
I know.
I don't like how Tivit looks, but I like the idea of the Tivit deck. I know it's very strong.
I don't like the look of it.
But I don't like his stupid little mustache. I don't like that he's a mustache cat. I don't like it.
That's my boyfriend doesn't like Kaikar because he's a bird with hands.
Oh yeah.
He's like I don't like.
And Kaikar's really strong too, so it's like
and he's like but he has human hands.
Damn, I didn't look. So does Kefnet, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, next, let's not focus on this because I'm going to start thinking about Kirby with human feet. Next best card in the deck is Mirelurk Queen. Fallout fans will know one of the scariest enemies in the games. For 4 and a blue, it's a 4/4 crab mutant with vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters. Great.
Nice.
Whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, specifically, draw a card. Then put a +1/+1 counter on Mirelurk Queen. This ability triggers only once each turn. So again, like with those, the Scorch Beast, with the zombie tokens, with the +1/+1 counters from your commander, best case scenario, this is getting buffed to a 7/7 with vigilance, and you draw 3 cards. That's awesome.
Seems really good.
That's really good.
Yeah. The once per turn thing doesn't really matter when every single player is milling on their turn.
Yeah.
It's a very steady draw engine for a deck like this on a creature that you can reanimate with the Master, and it doesn't matter what its base power is. It's going to generate a whole bunch of counters. So it seems like a very strong draw engine.
They're brand new cards. It's hard to read them sometimes.
You know who's eaten good in this set is crab typal decks. They love
crabs.
Cool new crabs.
They got some cool crabs in this set. Everything becomes crab eventually.
There's got one more that you wanted to mention as the best cards in this deck, and it is terrifying.
Oh, right. Yeah. I needed this to be known because I think it is one of the best cards in the deck. It is Strong, the Brutish Thespian, which is a 7/7 legendary creature mutant berserker for 4 and 2 green. It has Ward 2. It also has Enrage, like the dinos do. Mm-hmm. Whenever Strong is dealt damage, you get 3 rad counters and put 3 +1/+1 counters on him. You gain life rather than lose life from radiation. So you still get the benefit of self-mill, but you're not losing any life from it, and he can easily get out of control with some protection in the form of Ward. It's an immediate threat you have to deal with. You're swinging with a 7/7. They block. Now he's a 10/10, et cetera, et cetera.
And it fuels your self-mill, which is really nice in these decks.
Yeah. And every time the Enrage triggers, that's 3 rad counters for you, and you don't care because you're not taking damage anymore.
I'm gaining all that. I want stuff in my graveyard. That's why Strong's here.
Yeah, it gets to the point where, I'm not making the deck this way, but it gets to the point where with enough of that strategy, something like a Laboratory Maniac starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know, Strong keeps getting hit.
I will say in game night, someone got to a rad counter of 10.
Pretty good.
So, I mean, it's non-trivial. By the end, I think, there was 1 or 2 players at the table who had at least half their library in the graveyard.
Something interesting that Josh mentioned with rad counters is that if you have a rad of a certain amount, if you have like rad 5 or something like that, you know that at some point you're going to lose 5 life.
You do take that damage
because eventually you're going to mill in on land and then it'll go away. So for every rad counter that you give an opponent, it does represent eventual life loss. So you do have to be a little careful with Strong, but you're gaining a bunch of life off of him. So what are you worried about?
Yeah, I do like that idea, kind of strategically thinking about it like, yes, they're milling, but when you're putting 1 rad counter, it's like doing 1 damage.
Yeah,
eventually. Just later, maybe.
Just later. They're gonna mill non-lands. Okay. We are going to talk about the notable reprints in this deck. Again, $5 or more. In this deck, there are 4 of them. The first one is Inexorable Tide. $16 whenever you cast a spell Proliferate.
Cool card.
Really, really sweet. It's great with rad counters. I did want to mention, I guess we can talk about it a little later, but Proliferate in this deck is interesting because if somebody runs out of rad counters, your Proliferate is a lot worse. So you need to make sure that you're constantly fueling the rad to make so that your Proliferate is still good.
Which is why in the upgrades, I don't Proliferate at all.
Yeah, Proliferate is sort of like only good when you're already working.
Yeah, and we see how it works with Infect decks. It never actually works.
Yeah, when was the last time you died to that?
Against Craig, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. The next one is Branching Evolution. Speaking of yucky, Inexorable Tide, is a $16 reprint. Branching Evolution is at $12. This buffs all of your, whenever you get some +1/+1 counters, you get, what, twice as many?
Twice that many.
That seems good.
Significant.
The next one is Guardian Project, is sitting at $12.
Really?
Yeah. This is an excellent draw engine. Commander players know it. You love it. And this is also sweet in this deck. It's Nesting Grounds. It's $6 land that lets you move counters from one thing to another. Okay, so there are 4 notable reprints, and that means that the total reprint value for this deck is on the low side. It's $79.50 with 44 reprints in the deck. A little bit higher than the last one, but still a little lower than what we expect, especially for these precons pre-ordering around $60. We would hope that you get a little bit more reprint value than that. But again, they're cool Fallout cards, and it is the yuckiest Guardian Project you will ever see in your whole life. It's like a spaghetti bat. It's awful.
Spaghetti bat.
Yeah, he's sort of bat skins, and he's got these like long spaghetti arms. It's really not.
It's the master. That's a gross boy.
Well, it's the same gross boy that keeps this is his backside. Why do we have to
Squidbilly.
see him from the other side? With the 44 reprints in this deck, that means that each reprint is worth an average of $1.81. That's actually okay. That's pretty close to the average, which is $2.07. Again, it's on the lower side, but if you're a Fallout fan, it has the follow cards.
Yeah, and like we said before, we don't know how crazy people are actually going to go for some of these cards that don't have an EV yet. I mean, Liberty Prime is awesome. Wise Mothman is awesome. I know that the communities behind the respective properties like 76 and Fallout 4 and 3 can be extremely rabid. So you are going to get value out of these cards, I'm sure.
For sure. Yeah, they are collector's items. All right, it's time for the second time. We'll give you a little bit more warning this time. We're going to break down the stats. Nice. This deck has 11 pieces of ramp, 11 pieces of draw, 6 pieces of targeted interaction, 2 board wipes, 39 lands.
Too many.
Well, it's 15 basic lands, and it also has a Temple of the False God.
Still too many.
Which you don't really count as a land. Then there are 19 cards that put rad counters onto players. So that could be you, that could be your opponents, that could be everybody, or just one person. There are 19 cards that put +1/+1 counters on themselves or onto other things that create +1/+1 counters. There are 7 proliferate cards, and there are 10 cards with +1/+1 counter synergy. So these are like like Branching Evolution doesn't put +1 counters on something.
There's a hardened scales in this deck.
Exactly. Yeah. It like enhances your +1/+1 counter production. And those are cards that don't care about rad counters also, because I wanted to keep those kind of separate and see what the deck is doing. All right, all of those stats considered, let's talk about the upgrade goals, because I do think that this deck is very split. It is having a bit of an identity crisis.
Yeah, and that's always a surefire way to make your deck less powerful. So what I wanted to do is shy away from proliferate, shy away from +1/+1 counter strategy, and rather go more towards rad and more towards mill specifically. Part of that is I have a chip on my shoulder because I've always had a casual mill deck, and I think it's the next commander is going to come out, Captain Nagathod or whatever the horror guy.
Oh yeah, the horror. Yeah.
Tentacle face guy. I thought he was going to be good. He's not that good. I want a good mill deck. And I think it's time because this is a 3-color mill deck that will benefit from that creates mill just by itself.
What I like about the Wise Mothman as a mill commander too is that like mill decks often when you build them you don't benefit until they're dead. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a mill deck is trying to kill you, but in the meantime it's just trying to kill you more. Yeah. And they're not dead until they are all the way dead. Yeah. And that whole process, you're not getting any value. The Wise Mothman says, like, yeah, we're milling you, but in the meantime, you have to deal with this giant moth.
Yes, and you're taking damage from the rads.
Yes, so it's fighting you on multiple axes that isn't just like, I'm trying to deck you for your 100-card library.
Same basic reasoning with Liberty Prime. I want to do artifact stuff, but if I can't do that, smack.
Yep. You always got a backup smack option.
Back smack.
So we're going to really zero in on the mill here, and that'll put plenty of +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures because this deck is loaded up with mutants that you can pump with counters. All right, it's time. Let's do it. Let's add 10 cards using a budget of $50. We're going to start with, I think I put this in the wrong order. I think we should start with cards that mill.
Yes, let's do that because, that's fine. How do we actually get this engine going? There's not a lot of rad cards. It's a brand new thing. It's not going to be milling people for all that much unless something crazy happens. So how do we make sure we're getting cards in the graveyard and making it start to be scary for other people?
Yeah.
Couple of cards in that vein, which are always scary when you see them. Mesmeric Orb, which is an artifact for 2. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. So as we get into turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, and if we're in a Precon environment, turn 16, you can have opponents reliably milling 10 cards, then 11 cards, and 12. And your deck, by that point, is going to have 60 to 70 cards. So it does put a real clock on just that milling effect.
It does. There's also something very unique about Mesmeric Orb as a mill effect, because a lot of the time, we'll talk about him later, but you're milling huge chunks of cards, which means that like the Wise Mothman says that like, okay, you milled 8 things, so you can put 8 counters on to up to 8, 1 counter on up to 8 creatures.
Yeah.
Mesmeric Orb mills 1 card at a time. They're each individual triggers. So if you only have the Wise Mothman, you can put counter, 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 counter.
Even I knew this going into this.
I have a Sidisi deck, so I know how Mesmeric Orb works with like mill triggers.
Oh, that's much better.
Yeah, so it doesn't. So now you don't have to have a huge amount of creatures. To put counters on. You can just put them on. You can put them on 1 at a time.
Oh, and especially with our next card, that means you could probably swing in with the Mothman for lethal after 1 turn.
Immediately. This is an enormous threat.
Yeah, I'm talking about Keening Stone, which is an artifact for 6, which for 5, generic, target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards in that player's graveyard. So it's going to double each time that you do this, and if you know anything about mathematics, things that double get very big very quickly. If you were to take a quarter or a penny and place it on a checkerboard, and you were to double those number of coins each time it went into a new checkerboard square, by the time it got to the end of the checkerboard, it would go past the sun, which is 93 million miles away. So doubling
science,
doubling goes good. So Keening Stone does that, and with what you mentioned,
so Keening Stone's different because it's a huge chunk of cards.
That's a huge chunk specifically, but we have other cards that are going to take advantage of that too.
Yeah.
But I want to keep that pressure on.
Right.
Where I had a different card in that slot that was better, but
we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Keening Stone's only 50 cents. Mesmeric Orb is back up around $5.50 after its reprint. So reasonable prices on these for the most part. A classic mill card, you have to have it. It's a crab. It's ruined crab. It's been ruined.
Does that mean
it sort of goes with the Fallout?
Does that mean it's no longer good, or has it become a ruin?
I think in this case,
isn't it?
It means it has become a ruin.
I think it's living at a ruin.
It's just hanging. But in the
Fallout it's
world,
fine though.
But in the Fallout world, it's ruined.
So he's a ruined crab?
He's a ruined crab.
Ruin.
That's his name. Ruined crab's only $1.50. He has landfall whenever a land comes into the under your control. Each opponent mills 3 cards. This is great. This is a nice, steady mill train that comes down on turn 1 and starts your engine early. What I really like in decks like this is making sure that you're not taking a ton of time at the beginning to get your engines started. Like, you can play your signets and that kind of thing, but start playing synergy pieces early, even if they're not necessarily as powerful.
Yes.
So you got a full range of stuff.
Absolutely.
Speaking of cheap, it's also really powerful.
We have Altar of the Brood, which is 1 mana for an artifact. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 1, I think is probably
the errata.
Is the errata text. So, again, you're going to be putting permanents onto the battlefield is what you will be doing if you're playing Magic the Gathering. So this is just a very cheap, comes down turn 1, easy way to get that engine going and keep it going. And if you start leaning towards the more spicy builds of Mothman that you could do that involve blinking the Wise Mothman, for example, returning it for multiple ETBs, maybe even infinite ETBs if you wanted to get crazy, that card just wins. So it's good in both instances.
Yeah, this card is sweet. And again, it's like Mesmeric Orb, where it breaks up, it's a lot of mill that's broken up into single instances of mill. So you can get a lot of triggers from the Wise Mothman and make him and your other creatures very big, very fast.
Oh yeah, then like with the Screeching Scorch Beast, when the tokens are coming into play.
Yeah, the tokens only happen once per turn, which is their...
But then they stack on that, and then that goes on that guy. And
dangerous.
Yeah.
Dreamborn Muse is the final Mill More card for $2.75.
Commander All-Star, baby.
Dreamborn Muse. Seedborn Muse.
I remember hating this card. When I started out in 2011 playing Commander
Not Dreamborn Muse.
Commander exclusively in like 2011. This was one of those cards I was like, dang it, screw this card. I don't know why. It's not that good, but it's good as a mill engine.
It is. It says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts the top X cards of their library into their graveyard, where X is the number of cards in their hand.
I want to abuse card advantage. If people are getting card advantage in some way or off of you, or you're giving people cards, and this is a Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora kind of world that I play in, I want people to be churning through their deck, making less usable things because of how many cards they have in their hand.
Yeah, I love that. It's only $2.75, and the fact that it can put enough pressure on people's library that it could be like, I think I'm not going to draw.
Yeah.
I'm going to optionally not draw.
No, exactly. I've seen that. I've seen that. Yeah, in relation to other mill cards too. Yeah, it definitely does what you want it to do.
Ultra of the Brood is $7.50. I've been terrible at mentioning prices. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, then we've added a category of cards here that you've been milling your opponents. You really, like we said, we want to get value from that milling. That's not just your opponents have more cards in their graveyard.
Yeah.
So this really helps you take advantage of all of that milling work that you've been putting in.
Yeah, so in my estimation, probably the most powerful thing that you could be doing is just taking the best thing out of their graveyard.
Yeah.
And it's for you. There's not a lot of creature cards in this deck that would be great for self-milling. There's not that big haymaker of a card that you're trying to get to, like a Diluvian Primordial?
Aha! Boldovian. That's a nearby country.
The fact that I can pull it out of nowhere.
You got it.
Because we're going for a different Primordial. The first upgrade in that slot, I want to put in Sepulchral Primordial, which is a 5/4 with Intimidate for 7 mana. I know, but when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may put up to one target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it's for 7, yes, but you're getting the best creature out of their big milled graveyard, which is saying some part of their library, into the battlefield under your control. This can absolutely win the game, totally backbreaking when it happens, and for pretty cheap.
Yeah, it's only $2 for Sepulchral Primordial. And it's like you pay 7 mana for this, but you get 15 mana worth of permanence out of it, plus this 5/5 Intimidate. It's a lot of value. The next card is a classic. It's only $4. It's Animate Dead. It does what it says. It takes a thing from a graveyard and puts it into play. Same like Sepulchral Primordial.
It has a lot of conditions on top of that.
I'm not going to read them.
Don't worry about it.
Blah, 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 blah. That thing's not dead anymore, and there's an Animate Dead on it.
So what I would have in this place with no budget would be something like a Reanimate, which you lose life instead, but it's 1 mana. But Animate Dead is almost as good for 2 mana. Get the best creature out of any graveyard. It's exactly what you want to do, especially if you're leaning into milling and not into the more mimeoplasm, Muldrotha kind of strategy of getting stuff from your own library.
The next card is a classic, very, very powerful in mill decks. It's Bloodchief Ascension. After a reprint, this card is only $6. It's a single black for an enchantment that says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Bloodchief Ascension. Super easy to trigger with your red counters.
Exactly.
Also, you can proliferate those with your proliferate cards.
Oh, yeah.
Classic.
Hey.
Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Bloodchief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life.
This is probably going to be the best card in the deck if you choose to upgrade with it, because it's counting each card, each instance of a card being milled, and that's 2 life. So you're doubling. However many you mill take twice that much damage from a 1 mana cost enchantment that can just sit there. People are going to be taking 2 damage eventually 3 people will take 2 damage at some point.
From the rad counters. I mean,
from the rad counters alone, but even, just from normal things happening, 2 or more.
Yeah. Shocking in a shockland.
Exactly. And this comes down turn 1. It's just an extremely strong card. There's cards that completely break it, like Mind Crank, which we didn't include. But if you want to, I won't be mad. That immediately kill an opponent or all opponents if they mill.
Yeah, Mind Crank says whenever a player loses life, they mill that many cards. And Bloodchief Ascension says, oh, you're milling, lose life.
and then you mill 2, and then you lose 2, and then you mill 2, and then you... So they all die with their radiation counter, so they'd be extremely strong. Even something...
They don't die, they ascend to the blood gene.
I mean, even like in this instance, again, mill 20, take 40.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, very, very strong.
What I like about this is we're talking about fighting your opponents on multiple axes, right? You have a Sepulchral Primordial to be like, here's some creatures, these are a threat. Here's a Blood Chief Ascension, this is an enchantment, this is a threat. Also, your library is slowly disappearing. You're overwhelming what they can interact with here, and you're just pressure in every category.
Yeah,
that's very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, why the other mill decks aren't good, even like a Sir Bruvac the Grandiloquent, is that the finishers in that category you can't really pivot to a different plan. Sure, there's those synergies like Fraying Sanity, which is in this deck, which is also one of the best cards in this deck, and like a Traumatize, so mill your whole library.
Yeah.
There's stuff like that, but we can also swing in with, thanks to Mesmeric Orb, we can swing in with a 15/15 flyer, and you're taking damage if say you don't care so much about stuff being in your graveyard. So I think on multiple axes, that's really good. And one of the best ways to integrate some of those axes into one is our next upgrade card, our next to last upgrade card, Sir Conrad the Grim, which is a 5/4 for 3 and 2 black. If you know this card, you know it is extremely strong because you don't read it until you read it and then you die. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad, I always forget the third one.
Yep.
Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And for 1 and a black, each player mills a card.
So now every time anybody's milling, everybody's losing life. Except you, of course.
Yes. So so dealing damage to each opponent is huge. Being able to also mill, which you already want to do, is huge. It's a 5/4, which isn't irrelevant. And when you're milling these big chunks, does this work the way I want it to?
Oh, yeah.
Again, so
oh, yeah,
with
this one does.
A Keening Stone, a Mesmeric Orb can suddenly ding people for 5 and then 10 and then 15 or whatever it is, however many creatures are in their library. But if you've played against this card, like I said, you know how good it is, even against board wipes.
Yeah.
I mean...
They're like, we have to get rid of the Conrad of the Grim, but he also has this, but they also have that. And... you cast a board wipe, you're like, Conrad's gone, but we all lost 11, so...
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's extremely good. And speaking of extremely good, there's one thing that I always want more of, and it's card draw. And when I saw this next upgrade card, I think it is absolutely perfect in this deck, because it's Kodama of the West Tree, which is a 3/3 for 3 with reach. All Kodamas have reach.
Yeah.
Just realized that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because Kodama's reach.
Kodama's reach, yeah.
Okay, we get
You guys think you're so funny.
Magic for a living.
You're just so funny. Yeah.
Kodama of the West Tree, 3/3 with reach. Modified creatures you control have trample. And counters are modifications. So equipment and auras, and also counters. So if they have a +1/+1 counter, they are modified, and they have trample.
Huge.
Super relevant if you're going wide and putting 1 counter on multiple creatures. But even better, whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle.
Huge.
I mean, you can see how this would play out. I mean, you could be getting if you have just one instance where you're getting 2 or 3 land cards onto the battlefield with 1 swing, and they hit, deals combat damage because they have trample, you're going to be so far ahead, no one's going to be able to catch you. It's
a real snowball card.
It's really, really crazy.
It is on the spendier end. You're going to have to spend $18 to get Kodama into your deck, but this is extraordinarily powerful. It does so much that your deck wants, because like the only thing that you're worried about with the Wise Mothman is that they have a bunch of Thopters to chump block your thing, and now it's like, oh, your Thopter isn't big enough for my 40/40 flying.
Yeah, exactly.
Like giant-eyed nightmare creature.
Yeah.
It turns everything into threats, and then on top of that, your threats are now value.
Yeah, turning all of your weird little synergistic creatures into rampant growths with trample,
nice,
is nuts. It's really, really good, and you're gonna want that mana to activate some of these, bigger things. I mean, pour all that into Sir Conrad.
Nice.
Pour all that into Keening Stone. It's gonna be good.
All right. The total value of this upgrade is $48.50. We've got it right under the wire. But if you want to get a little bit spendier, there is a fun one you can throw in.
It's Roaming Throne, which I'm sure you know, but it's a 4-mana 4/4 with Ward 2. Why make it so good?
I don't know.
It enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It's the chosen type. If a triggered ability of another creature you control triggers of the chosen type, it triggers again. So this is the best card in a bunch of decks now. Mm-hmm. But given that this, what did we say? There's 23 mutants in this deck.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking to upgrade on the spendier side, having every trigger from 23 creatures go off twice, especially Wise Mothman.
Yep.
Attack, 2 rad counters, then 2 instances of those +1/+1. So it will also get +2/+2. Anyway.
It's really powerful.
It's super, super strong. It goes in a bunch of decks. If you have some extra cash laying around, pick it up. I bought 4 when they were spoiled. This is a playset. I was like, I'm going to use them.
It's expensive now.
Yeah.
All right. We've added 10. We've got to take 10 cards out. Again, some of these precons have very flavorful cards, but not super impactful cards. Some of these cuts are a little easier to do. Starting with this first one, it was a cool card, but really weird in this deck.
Yeah, like you said, same thing as last time. Super flavorful, but because they're going, I think, for the flavor, adding in cards that you recognize, they can't all be shoehorned into one strategy.
Exactly, yeah.
And the first one is Piper Wright, Public Reporter. For 2 mana, 1 and a blue, it's a legendary creature, Human Detective. It's a 1/2. Whenever Piper deals combat damage to a player, investigate that many times. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control.
There's going to be decks. This is sweet.
This could go into Liberty Prime. This could go into Science. If you're creating those artifact tokens that you can sacrifice, I think it makes more sense there.
Yeah.
But this is pure +1/+1 counter synergy and no mill synergy. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
You'll see in a lot of these decks, I don't know when they're all going to get revealed by Command Zone here, but once you see all of the decks, you will see that there's a lot of cards that are super flavorful that may not work in the deck, but they're total build-arounds if you're a Fallout fan.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about a battle box style thing is you're like, I really like this commander, I really like this commander. I'm going to build these using in-world cards.
Like this next card. Which,
exactly. It's Harold and Bob. I love these guys, and I don't even play this game.
You can.
They're the first Newmans.
You can shoot one of them in the heart, even though they're a living tree.
No, not
you don't have
Harold and Bob. The first Newmans. It's 2 and a green for a tree folk mutant. It's a 3/3 with vigilance and reach. When Harold and Bob dies. When Harold and Bob dies, if it was a creature, if they were a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with enchant force you control, and tap, add 3 mana of any one color. You get 2 rad counters, and it loses all other abilities. So,
now, this would be really good if it was just the enchantment.
Yeah.
It would be exactly what we want. For 3 mana, add 3, it'd probably be a little bit busted.
Yeah.
But giving you the rad counters, that's good. What's hard to make this work is that it's conditional. We don't have.
There's no sack outlet.
There's no sack outlet.
How do you make this thing die?
Yeah, exactly. And if people know that and they know they know that you want to get to that end point, you're just not going to block or block.
Yeah. This is a super sick deck in a self-mill, or card in a self-mill deck with sack outlets. In this deck, it is just going to be a 3 mana 3/3 with vigilance and reach, which is just kind of awkward and not super helpful.
Yeah, more of like a Muldrotha card or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. The next one, the name really makes me laugh.
The next one, again, flavorful, doesn't do what we want to do in this build, but it's weird. But I'll get to that. It is Lily Bowen, Raging Grandma.
She is.
She's
big and purple and buff.
She's great in the games too. For 3 and a green, it's a 0/0 with vigilance.
Nice.
Enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, but at the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of +1/+1 counters on this creature if its power is 6 or less. Otherwise, remove
16 or less.
16 or less. Sorry, I'm all the way back here. 16 or less. So this can get very, very big. However, otherwise, remove all but 1 +1/+1 counter from it. Then you gain
1 life for each counter
removed this way. So it will get up to a 16/16, and then you will gain a bunch of life.
Yeah. So it goes from 2 to 4, 4 to 8. 8 to 16, and then it's like, back down to 1, you gain 15 life.
Yes, which is weird, but it's cool, but it's not doing anything that we want. You could have +1/+1 synergies. If you were doing more of a +1/+1 build, then you could have this card going with things like the Ozolith or something like that. You sack it, put 15 +1/+1 counters on that, move into something else.
Yeah.
But we don't really have a real way to take advantage of this. If Lily had trample,
doesn't have that.
Maybe. But
also, you're putting counters on your stuff with the Mothman, which sort of speeds up her clock, which means she's going to get smaller.
I guess maybe the idea is you're gaining some of the radiation life loss back.
Life,
but you're not losing. You're losing like 2 or 3 at a time, not like 15. So
again, we're building a little less around the counters of strategy. So this one's coming out too. It's Lumbering Mega Sloth. It's a 10 green for an 8/8 Sloth mutant. 12 mana 8/8. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each counter among players and permanents.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Okay. It is trample.
That's good for an 8/8.
Nice. And when it enters the battlefield, tapped.
Boo.
Predictably, the Mega Sloth is slow.
Yeah. Oh, that is fun. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's flavorful. Oh, it's coming. So best case scenario, it's an 8/8 trample for 2 mana, but it comes into the battlefield tapped, can't block, super slow, doesn't do any +1/+1, any mill, any radiation.
Nope.
Fun card.
Just big.
Avatar of Might can also be an 8/8 trample for 2.
Yep.
Comes into play untapped. One of my favorite all-time cards.
Yeah. Avatar of Might.
I like the art.
Yeah. Sometimes that's what it does.
Remember, I was a child when I started playing this game.
I mean,
I imprinted on certain cards.
Absolutely. Yeah. I completely understand that.
One of my first card arts I fell in love with was, as you can see on screen right now, Regeneration. And now look at me. I became that guy. Isn't that weird?
Sometimes you manifest these things.
Yeah, I think so.
The next card we're cutting is Power Fist.
Super flavorful, but not quite good enough for my taste. We're 1 and a green. It's an artifact equipment. You can equip it for 2. It has trample. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Obviously, it can be super good on something like a Mothman, but I would rather have cheaper green effects do this than an equipment. And we're not leaning into the +1/+1 synergy.
Yeah.
If you're getting all of the commander decks, this would go much better in Dogmeat. Which cares about equipment, and Dogmeat can get very big and very scary, and you'd want it to have trample. So fun card. One of my favorite weapons in Fallout games. I like to make a heated Power Fist and then punch them with thermal damage. Oh, of their skin. But again, leaning away from the +1/+1, more towards mill.
Next one that is going is Recon Craft Theta. This is a 4 mana, 4/4 flying vehicle. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 0/0 blue alien creature token, put a +1 counter on it, and when it attacks, proliferate. Crew 2.
Okay.
It's okay. The weird thing about vehicles is you have to, like, in order to put counters on it with the Mothman, you have to have crewed the vehicle to put the counter on it, and then you're doing that once per turn, so you can't, like, crew it. You have to crew it multiple times to keep putting counters on it.
And if you're playing, I play Shurikai, and one thing that you want to do to be tricksy is to not crew. If you're not attacking, don't crew until you absolutely have to, or trick people into like, oh yeah, they have no blockers. Ha! Ha! So
you don't want to be crewing this thing all the time.
Although the alien art from Fallout 3 there, I think Project Zeta is the name of the DLC. Anyway, I love the art. It's a fun card. Probably goes in my Shurikai deck, but not this one.
Yep. Okay, up next
is Young Deathclaws, which is a 4/2 for 4 mana and 2 and Golgari. It has Menace. And each creature card in your graveyard has Scavenge. The Scavenge cost is equal to its mana cost. So this does work with a mill strategy. It allows you to get creature cards back out of your library. But for my money... Oh, not creature cards. Sorry. It allows you to use the creature cards in your graveyard to put +1/+1 counters on it. You know what I'm going to say at this point. I'm leaning away from that. Yep. And I don't necessarily want to get creature cards out of my graveyard if I'm doing some of these other things like Animate Dead.
Right. Absolutely. And it's like, this isn't a great rate for +1/+1 counters, right? Like you're making a ton of +1/+1 counters for free with your commander and all of your new mill strategies. You don't necessarily want to be paying 4 for 4 +1/+1 counters.
Or less, right?
Or less, it's equal to its power.
Yeah, so
exactly.
So it could be
not a bit of a Nambo with the grandma who has no power.
Nambo with the grandma. Our next card, I think, can be really strong in the right deck.
I think this card's sweet, I agree.
I think this card, it will see play outside of these decks, but maybe not here. Watchful Radstag, 2 and a green for a 2/2, which has Evolve, which means when another creature enters the battlefield, if it has more power or toughness than it, put a +1/+1 counter on the stag. Whenever Watchful Radstag evolves, create a copy.
So cool.
So you can see a Scoot Swarm situation start to happen, or a...
Because it makes it 2/2 again, so now
were you the one making the Living Ooze deck? That I was...
No, with the new one with the slime
AVIE or AV.
Oh, I did. I had an Eve deck for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
I remember that.
Great in Eve because like you keep making bigger ones, so each one will trigger and make more Radstags, which will all get bigger.
Yeah.
And you keep making copies. It's really, really sweet. But I feel like it is better in like a stompy deck that can regularly trigger Evolve.
Well, yeah, and the problem is that Evolve triggers on an ETB.
Right.
So if you make, say, with the Wise Mothman, one of your creatures bigger with a +1/+1 counter, it doesn't trigger Evolve.
Yeah.
If it did, then this card is busted.
Yeah, now...
and it'd be super, because you could put a +1 on all of them, and then that one triggers that
this
one.
This comes in, and all gets countered.
Yeah,
infinite Radstags.
Yeah, so...
Which sounds sick.
It does sound sick. So... I think it could be really cool in the right deck, especially green decks with a lot of differing powers and ascending power levels and things like that. But not this one.
Yep. Up next, we are losing Jason Bright, Glowing Prophet. He's 2 and a blue for a zombie mutant advisor. Whenever a zombie or mutant you control dies, if its power was different from its base power, draw a card. And then it has a sack outlet. That's called Come Fly With Me.
Which is a reference to the side quest where...
Is that his plane? He's inviting you onto his plane?
Not even a plane. It's a spacecraft. So in the game, he and a bunch of other ghouls are supposed to go into the great beyond, and you have to help them make their spaceships or rockets work again and then launch them into the great beyond.
Oh, God.
It's it's a cult. But it's fun. It's a very fun quest.
It's a fun cult.
It's a very fun quest.
It's 2 and sacrifice target creature you control. It gains flying until end of turn. Cute. You launch them into the great beyond.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So this card and another honorable mention card that we'll get to, I think works really cool in a zombie deck. I think it can go right into, the Grim Grins or the...
Yeah, as long as you have like an Anthem effect or something like that, then Jason will trigger. It is tough. You don't really want to pay 2 and sack a creature to draw a card. It's just not a great rate. But if you have free sack outlets, then Jason becomes way, way, way better.
Yeah, here our creatures are doing stuff like Sir Conrad. They're not the repeatable things like an Muldrotha with Spore Frog that we want to keep doing. So cool card, and like I said at the beginning, cool build around card, cool zombie card, but not a card for this rad mill deck.
All right, the final card we are losing is similar. It's Hancock, Ghoulish Mayor. 2 and a black for a zombie mutant advisor. He's a legendary. Each other creature you control that's a zombie or a mutant gets +X/+X, where X is the number of counters on Hancock. He also has Undying. So when he dies, if he didn't have a counter on it, he comes back. A little weird in a +1/+1 counter deck.
But you can see how he would start buffing all of your mutants really quick, especially with Wise Mothman putting more +1/+1 counters on him.
Yeah.
Still think it's better in a different strategy, but super cool. Hancock is one of a lot of players' favorite characters from Fallout 4. Super interesting guy, super interesting story behind him. So another build around possibly, or zombie guy possibly, but
yeah,
no rad, no mill.
you just don't give your creatures what they need, right? You have the buff already. Your commander is giving them the buff. What they need is evasion. They need is like, trample or some other ability to really push your creatures over the top.
Yeah, this was
and he just makes them more bigger.
Yeah, if this was like Skulk or like a Champion of Lambholt like effect.
Exactly. That sort of changes the game. Yeah. All right, those are the 10 cards in. Those are the 10 cards out for the Mutant Menace.
Get them out of here.
Get them out. Bill, put them in another deck. Watchful Red's deck is awesome.
Yeah.
All right, now is the part in the episode where we're going to talk about these two decks. We're going to bring them head to head. And we decided that it would be fun for the Fallout episode that we're going to break down each of the traditional Fallout stats.
So you're going to have
we're going to talk about the special stats.
So forgive us here if these don't fit perfectly, but you're going to get the spirit of what we're going
for. It's fun.
You'll get it.
So first, we're going to talk about the S in the special acronym, which is Strength. We're going to talk about these cards at post-upgrade, these decks post-upgrade, which we think is just stronger overall, is the first one.
In my opinion, I think the Liberty Prime deck is the stronger one. I really, really like the Radiation deck because I'm a Radiation nuclear boy. And I like the flavor of the deck a lot. I just think it's harder to get going because you have to depend on a new counter that's never been seen before and the random chance of what gets milled by those radiation counters. So by having a new thing that doesn't have all the tools that you want, and that I think having Liberty Prime that takes advantage of artifacts, which there are 10 billion of, and it's a huge beater in the command zone, I think it's stronger.
Yeah, it's tough to argue with that. I mean, Liberty Prime is an energy engine, a card draw engine, and a threat with haste. And all of those
and vigilance
is just really, really strong. All of those combined into a commander means your deck has a whole bunch of support. And while the Mothman does a lot for you, it's like milling your opponents and putting counters on your stuff. That doesn't really help you if your plan's not working. So it's hard to argue with the strength of just a good, consistent commander.
Yeah, and I think we were focusing just on the commanders there, but generally too, I mean, there's just more artifacts, there's more artifact synergies. They may not be as flavorful if you upgrade all of them to the best of your ability. But the Mothman deck, you're like you said, you're trying to take advantage of so many other things that may or may not work. It's hard to make all of those really sing. It's harder to make all those work in tandem.
Sure. The next one in the acronym is P for Perception.
And mill decks suck.
Mill decks are bad. Everybody knows that.
You can try to make it good, but it's going to be difficult. It's going to be harder than just...
I'm hoping this is the one. Honestly, Mothman feels very, very powerful.
Well, it could be if you let me have a budgetless upgrade. But
yeah, you're right.
But yeah, I mean, I would go... All the tutors, Mindcrank, Blood Chief, go for it.
There you go.
Every turn.
Then the deck's busted.
Wishclaw Talisman, Vampiric Tutor, bam, 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 bam. Yeah. I would do that. I think it could be...
But then you don't even cast your commander.
See, then you get away from the flavor and you don't care as much.
Exactly. That's why you need budget.
Yeah. So in its current iteration, just harder to beat Brea without black.
Well, let's talk about Perception. So... This one's a little...
What were we calling Perception?
The Perception in Commander, we decided, is something like you get a good perspective on the game and you can interact in a more meaningful way. I think in Commander, it's nice to when there's certain decks that get to sit back and get the lay of the land and make decisions sort of more reactively and more powerfully. And then there's some decks that are just like, go!
So what do you think?
I think in this deck, I do like the Mutant Menace for it because you're doing we're going to do some milling. We're going to see a lot of cards. We get a lot of selection.
I was going to say the same thing. You get an idea, even if it's small from just a couple of mills, you get an idea of what every single deck at the table is doing or trying to do. And especially if you've ever played against a mill deck or any mill cards, the players will immediately give up the information when they're milling anyone who gets milled, they will always tell you with their face that they hate it. Yeah. And so that gives you a lot of information. Where with Liberty Prime, draw cards, attack, artifacts, artifact stuff, you kind of have an idea of exactly what you're doing and what it's going to do.
It's also a lot more blind to what the table's doing.
Yeah,
like,
you don't need to know what the table's doing.
That's not your problem. You're here to hit him with a big robot. So I think in terms of perception, I think the mutant deck has it. The next one's interesting because I'm not sure between these two decks.
Yeah.
It's endurance is the E.
Now,
endurance is longevity in the game. Who has got the better late game, especially if they get interrupted?
So from my perspective playing Liberty Prime on game nights, I think I'm going to go with Liberty Prime because if all else fails, I have a game ender with haste. And this was relevant in the game, whereas though it was surprising how much radiation did something in game nights. It was surprising. But when it starts to peter out, I think people just stop caring and it doesn't do as much. It's not like the effect isn't stacking. Yeah. So if you repeatedly kill the Wise Mothman or something like that, the radiation and the milling will just kind of trickle away.
Right.
So if you're totally building towards that synergy, I think it can fail a lot easier than just artifacts are good, let's keep playing them.
I think I agree with that. I think if you do more of an upgrade, I think if you shift the Mothman more into a graveyard deck, if you do more of a Sultai Self-Mill, then you really up the endurance there. And I think that is...
I would switch if it was that. I mean, it's hard with the welder package and stuff like that. But you put like a Muldrotha in your Mothman deck and suddenly I think it's probably right up there.
Yeah, like even a Living Death, that kind of stuff. Living Death is dangerous when you're milling your opponent. So it's more of a self-mill thing. But like you have the potential to rebuild much faster, whereas artifacts are very easily interrupted repeatedly. If there's a Bane of Progress in a game, you're sort of toast.
Which you can cast from your graveyard multiple times? And has +1/+1 counters?
Yeah. Upgrade?
Actually, it wouldn't be that bad.
It changes. It's really gonna. I think out of the box, I would give it to the artifact deck. Well, with our upgrades, I think I would give it to the artifact deck. But there is certainly a version of the mutant deck that is going to grind.
Oh, definitely, 100%. Yeah, you say you play Sidisi. I play Muldrotha. Those artifact strategies are just generically good.
Yeah. Up next is Charisma. So this one's interesting. We're sort of guessing the popularity contest here. So Charisma for me is like, which one do you think is going to sell better? Which one do you think is going to get built more? So, like, this is, I guess, more based on the face commander or our chosen commander.
I mean, I feel like I'm always leaning towards one thing, but I don't see how Liberty Prime isn't going to be extremely popular. It's super strong. It's a game ender. It's artifacts. Everyone loves artifacts.
It's got a Shurikai thing about it.
It's got a Shurikai thing. You can play Shurikai in it, and it's very good.
They're both 8/8. They're brothers.
And you can crew one with the other one. But it's
funny.
It's really strong. It ends games. It's flavorful. The art is awesome. It has great artifact colors. And if I'm being honest, knowing the game, Fallout 3 and 4 are much more popular than Fallout 76.
Sure.
Which is where the Mothman is from.
That's
so
fair.
Even though I love the radiation theme personally, and I will personally build both decks, I think there's no way Liberty Prime isn't going to be way up there, especially knowing all the other cards and all the other decks now.
I think there's a certain draw of energy, too. There's a lot of nostalgia there for people who really love Kaladesh and really liked that archetype, which was very popular when it was in Standard and when it was sort of in its heyday. I think having a new opportunity to do like a refreshed version of energy is going to be very attractive to people.
And, but in wider contests, good luck any of these beating Dogmeat. It's not going to happen.
He's a good boy.
Oh, I have an Azan equipment deck, and that's just strictly...
You have a Nizan, like the 6-mana Nizan?
Yeah.
That rules.
I know, I love them. It's cool. Kitties with swords.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
Oh, that's good.
Up next is Intelligence. This is the I. So we decided for Intelligence in Commander, this means like you get to play smarter. So there's some decks that are just like go, just do the thing and hope it works. And there's some decks that you have to be a little bit more considered about and a little bit more precise about.
Yeah. So for this, even I was able to do with Liberty Prime some of the tricksy stuff that we were talking about because it has vigilance. You can attack and also use its ability. You can sacrifice itself. But for me, it's kind of like counter spells and knowing when to use them, knowing how to interact with everyone being milled and what people might have in their deck, but it's not anymore. So is it in their hand, and what are they going to do? Do I care if they have cards in their graveyard or not? That requires a little bit more thinking to me. So I might lean towards the Mothman on that one.
This is an interesting one for me. I do think that, like, because your commander does so many things, like the Liberty Primes, it gives you so many options. You're going to be like, I can attack, I can hold him back to block, I can sack something. What do I sack? To draw a card, to make the energy. How do I spend the energy? Do I spend it on this?
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot more choices in an artifact deck, whereas I do think the Mutants deck is going to be a little bit more like, I mill everybody and hope I get stuff. I'm going to make my stuff big, and I hope that's enough.
Yeah. I can see both arguments, because when I was playing this deck, there was a point at which my board was big enough that I had so many options, then I felt really strong.
Artifacts can become a bit of a nightmare.
I can sacrifice this, I can tap this, I can make this a copy of that, I can attack, I can do that. But I guess to me it's kind of like the more traditional card game problem of, if you know a lot of information about your opponent's decks and you're milling them, you're getting a lot of information about the deck. So
that's true.
It's hard for me to say. I see a lot of play in both strategies for sure.
I agree.
And who to mill?
It's nobody is the answer until they're dead. But if you're draining them, then you can do a little bit more work there. Yeah, we did talk about how the mutant deck fights on a lot of axes. So figuring out when to pressure life totals, and when to pressure and to hold back stuff to attack, and when to pressure decks. Sometimes you'll pressure one player's deck and the other player's life total.
Yes,
and that's tricky to balance.
Yeah.
So this one could really go either way. But in terms of agility, I do think the mutant deck sort of has the artifact deck licked. Because it's so flexible.
Yes.
You can go the reanimation strategy, you can go the drain, you can go for the deck stuff, and you're playing on so many different levels that you can respond to the deck that your opponents are playing.
There are just, even though radiation is a new thing, mill is not, and neither are +1/+1 counters, there are just not that much energy stuff that you can do that is good.
Yeah.
That's why I went with Liberty Prime in the first place. So if he, she, they gets dealt with, then it does have haste. Super
bring it back.
Super relevant. But it's hard to get back on the energy game plan. I know specifically during game nights, I think there was at least 2 turns where I could have cast Liberty Prime, but I had no energy.
Yeah. And you're like, oh no,
and nothing,
doesn't do anything.
And nothing that I don't want to, turn 4, then sack a mana rock, because I'd rather start ramping. So yeah, I think you're totally right. With between +1 and milling and any of the other upgrades, if you want to add them, I think you can start being pretty scary a lot of different ways.
All right, we've got one final category, and this one's a little harder to determine for Commander what this means. It's luck. Because in the game, you're like, if you get lucky, you can basically fail upwards.
Yeah.
Like, you can win a match you're not supposed to win.
I feel like milling is kind of the lucky thing, where it is, well, first of all, it's not very good, but you don't know what people are going to mill. You don't know if you're going to get +1/+1 counters.
You have to hope that you're lucky in a lot of ways.
So it's not a spoiler, but there was 2 instances in game nights where the number of radiation counters on a person would kill them, depending on what they milled.
Right, yeah. Don't tell us what happened.
I won't, but
oh my God.
But right, like 60 to 30 chance if you're building like 30 lands versus 60 non-lands, something like that. So you have that.
You really have to hope you high roll.
You're going to your turn. You're like, okay. And I really want people to get radiation poisoning for like a flavor win for me. So
just do it for Kyle.
Do it for me.
Died.
Yeah, come on.
I like the idea.
I went to Chernobyl for you.
To the giving this one to the mutant deck. So we've got. I mean, this means that we're split, right? This means the mutant wins 3 categories, and it all sort of comes down to that intelligence vote. And chat, I think I'm gonna chat. See, now we're talking to chat, the tiny people in the camera. I'm going to leave it up to you in the comments. Which one do you think wins this intelligence vote? Do you have to be a little bit smarter to win with the creaturey mill deck?
Yeah.
Or do you have to work it out with the science deck? It makes sense that it would be science, but I don't know. They're pretty tight to me.
Yeah, and also with the upgrades that we suggested, if there's any other upgrades that we're missing, you can put them in the comments below. You can critique it's fine if you think that I added bad cards and you want to add better cards. But what deck do you think would be the best budget upgrade as well?
That's a fun one. Yeah. Which do you think is more special? Thank you guys for listening. If you want to pick up either of these products, you can do so at cardkingdom.com/command, and you can do so while supporting the show. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of Magic cards. They have them in a variety of printings, of conditions, of all of the different versions that you need for your Commander decks. We're Commander players. We're picky about what cards go where. Make sure your theming is precise, especially if you're building around Fallout. You want exactly the right printings. Luckily, Card Kingdom has a huge selection of Magic cards. So when you're shopping, you can get a ton of them all in one place. And Card Kingdom will ship them to you in one safe package. They have the professionalism to make sure that when your cards go in the mail, they're going to come out of the mail in the same condition that you paid for. You can support the show and pick up the Magic cards that we know you're going to buy anyway, going over to cardkingdom.com/command. And once those cards are in your hands, you're going to need to protect them. Go to ultrapro.com/command. ULTRAPRO has a huge selection of cool new Fallout products. If you're into Fallout, look at their playmats. Check out the new sleeves. You can build a Fallout deck in the world of Fallout because ULTRAPRO has the licensing to get access to the officially licensed Magic art. ULTRAPRO has high-quality Magic accessories to make sure that your cards look amazing, but are also protected too. Support the show and support your Magic cards over at ultrapro.com/command. Thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. You guys make these episodes possible. Damon Lentz, Eric Lem, Megan Yibka, Rob Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Long, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Coleman, Trafford, Josh Lee Kwai, and Jimmy Wong, and of course, to Kyle Hill for taking the time to do this upgrade, and of course, you'll see him on game nights.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. It was great
pleasure.
it was great to be back after so many years, and for something that I know I'm going to go very hard on these Fallout decks. It was a great time.
The coolest thing about Universes Beyond is talking to people who love this universe, because that's the benefit of this, right? Like, this is where it's coolest.
Yeah.
It's like seeing characters that you know on Magic cards and what they do, and being able to be like, driving. It's sort of a different version of an RPG, especially for a lot of
It's still
players.
kind of an experiment, Universes Beyond. I know I've had the feeling of, this one, I don't really care about this universe so much, I'm not going to get it. But then they come in swinging with the Fallout one, and I'm all in.
And you're like, I love it. I love Universes Beyond.
I'm all in. So I'm super excited to play these decks. And I'm also going to try to give people an accurate number of radiation counters that would actually kill them in real life.
How many? Does it depend on the opponent?
1,000 would be
1,000?
100% guaranteed death. That's about 10 sieverts, which is...
That's a lot of milling.
Yeah, the LD90 on...
Okay, so if you blink the Mothman enough times...
1,000 times.
Give everybody 1,000.
Deadeye Navigator, Peregrine Drake, Mothman. Or Food Chain, Mothman.
Flavorful radiation win. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.